Hey there, internet friends. Welcome to another episode of That Nerdy Site Show, a weekly podcast where the team members from That Nerdy Site get together to talk about our lives and all of the nerdy things we love about them. I'm your host, Trevor Starkey, and joining me once again, as always, Cameron Abbott. How you doing, Cameron?
Hey, what's going on, everybody?
What's going on is today is our big Game of the Year special. We're going to talk through all of our favorite games from 2024. If you've never been around for any of our Game of the Years in the past, we've each basically got our top 10 lists as well as some honorable mentions that we're going to kind of talk through. We'll talk through honorable mentions first, and then we will go through kind of our number 10s, then our number 9s, and our number 8s, and so on and so forth. If one of us hits a game and I'm like, oh, I've got this game as my number 10 game, and Cameron has it higher on the list, he'll just kind of chime in and say, I've got that higher. And we will hold off until we reach to the point on Cameron's list where it's basically at its highest zenith. And then we will, usually we've had more people in the past doing this, so the fact that it is just Cameron and me this year hopefully won't be the 4-hour epic we've done in years past, but who knows, maybe we'll be very verbose still. But we're also both coming over cold. Obviously, you can tell from my deeper than usual voice. So yeah, and then at the end of everything, we will kind of tabulate, our number 1 games will get 10 points, our number 2 games will get 9 points, 3, 8, and so on and so forth. And we will combine our lists together to come up with the That Nerdy Site top 10 games of 2024. So yeah. Which, past winners include Borderlands 3 and
hopefully we get less of that time this year around too.
Like we've had some good ones too of Ghost of Tsushima, and it's in the past it has historically been whichever game all of us played was the one that just by the process of it having 3 or 4 people's worth of points ended up making its way to the top of the list. The fact that it's just the two of us this year, I think it'll be a more contentious in terms of like our top few numbers will, be the ones that are rising to the top. If you like what you hear, please remember to like, subscribe, rate, review, share the podcast with all your friends, all that fun stuff. Diving into honorable mentions first. Cam, I'll throw it to you. What's your first honorable mention?
Do you want to do honorable mentions or dishonorable mentions first?
I mean, if you want to do dishonorable, I wasn't really looking at like dishonorable mentions for this one because let's just celebrate the things we liked. We can have dishonorable mentions in our
in the write-ups. I got that.
Like that. Or if you want to just do a quick here are the shitty things I didn't like this year.
Honestly, I'm going to save it for the write-up. I think that's a good tease right there. Hey, you want to see our dishonorable mentions? You want to see the things that frustrated us? Check out our write-ups.
Yeah.
I think that's a good idea right there.
Yeah. We'll throw out there both of our dishonorable mentions. I'm sure is Star Wars Outlaws. Like neither of us really like that. That's not going to appear anywhere on either of our lists.
If you listen to our spoiler cast on Star Wars Outlaws, that should not come as a surprise.
Yeah.
We both gave that game like a 5, or a 5.5 or something, and like the nicest thing we could say is that game's mediocre.
Yeah, I will say in that vein, my overall written list, as I often do, is going to be a top 20 games of the year with a few additional honorable mention kind of things in that. And so the dishonorable mentions will probably still be in that top 20 because I only barely played 20 games this year. So you'll find my kind of my thoughts overall on that list. Whereas, I think Cam's going to do kind of a separate breakout for dishonorable mentions, honorable mentions, and then your top 10.
Yep. That is usually how mine goes.
Yeah. So actual honorable mention, what do you want to give some love to that didn't make your top 10?
First one, and I think this is going to be a surprise for a lot of people, is Persona 3 Reload.
Okay.
Big reason behind Persona 3 Reload not making it to my top 10 this year is I'm only about 12 hours into the game by the end of the year. And the reason for that is there's a lot of reasons to it, and I go down in my breakdown of what I wrote for it, and I was pretty thorough in why I haven't put more time into this game. I do think that if we're talking gameplay wise and game experience wise, this is by far the best version of Persona 3 you're going to find. But as far as the story goes, I'm still, and I'm on record saying this again before, the female protagonist version of Persona 3's story and social links, I still find it to be superior. Mm-hmm. And it is sad, and not just because I want to the social links you get that are kind of changed out. The biggest one is Junpei. Junpei becomes a proper social link in the female protagonist version, and it is by far a better version of Junpei's story than you get in the standard Persona 3 male protagonist canon, quote unquote canon timeline. It is outside of that. This is also like my third time playing Persona 3's story.
Mm-hmm.
So getting into it feels a lot more like, okay, I'm going to go do this, check these boxes here, make sure I optimize my time. And that's not something that I was finding myself getting like caught up in or lost in. It doesn't help that I was playing it through Game Pass through my mobile phone for the last half of this year.
Mm-hmm.
And it has just not grabbed me in a way. Like, I know on a technical level, this is the best way that Persona 3 has ever been available playability wise. But story wise, it's not grabbing me the way that it needed to make me want to commit my time into it, especially with what is unfortunately lackluster social links. And for those who don't know, the Magician and Chariot social links are probably the two biggest ones that are like a big step. Like, once you play through it with the female protagonist and you get those social links, going back to the male version, it's a massive step down, story quality wise. And also like just personal taste wise as well. So unfortunately, it's, in my opinion, not the definitive way to experience the story. But that being said, also, this is my third time playing this game. And its story was never the one to grab me. I know this is like a lot of people's favorite Persona game. A lot of this was their first Persona game. As somebody who has now played every single Persona game in the series, barring the ones that came out on the 3DS, the Q
the
series.
Persona Q games.
The Persona Q
I have
games.
at least one of those over there.
You do.
Yeah.
I believe I also have you have the box version of it, like the special edition.
Yep.
As somebody who did not play outside of those, I've played every other Persona game. Persona 3 has never ranked at the top of my list anyway. And it just doesn't make it. It's unfortunate. I'm hoping in the new year it's the game that sticks to me in the new year, but as of right now, as we're recording this, it is missing it. Also, another thing too is even without a female protagonist, the fact that we were in the year 2024 with a new Persona game, and there still wasn't a male love interest option. Frustrating.
Yeah. I mean, for me, I didn't even bother picking up Persona 3 Reload this year or checking it out, in large part because I only just played Persona 3 for the first time last year on Game Pass, or 2023 on Game Pass. And very much, we talked about it at the time, it was I just kind of skated through that game. I think Persona has done things better in 4 and 5 since then. And nothing about Persona 3 stood out as this is the best version of what they've done with and I think a lot of that comes to Persona 4 Golden being my first one, and then Persona 5 doing such a great job kind of building on that. I was
and you played 5 Royale, right?
I played 5 and 5 Royale.
Yeah. So you saw the enhancements that 5 Royale had, and I think the mistake I was making.
I did appreciate that. In playing Persona 3, I did play, because it was Persona 3 Fez, I think, is the one that's on the pre-remaster one. I think was Fez.
Was Fez.
So I did play the female protagonist.
No, so that was portable.
Oh, okay. PS3, yeah, PC, P3P.
P3P,
portable.
yeah.
So I did play that one with the female protagonist. So I did at least get that experience. But yeah, overall, it was just I didn't care about that cast of characters in the way that I cared about 4 and 5's crews. And
this is a complaint I have about it, is those early, at least for my experience, I don't know if they've changed, if it's changed later on, but social link scenes are extremely short.
Yeah.
And it shows the progress and growth of the kind of quality social links have in really stepping up in 4 and then really nailing it in 5 and 5 Royale.
There's only one social link I even remember from Persona 3, and it's the kid on the bench social link. I won't delve into that for spoiler purposes or anything like that. But that's the only one that resonated with me or has stuck with me in the nearly 2 years since playing the game. Everything else is just forgettable, and I was just kind of doing it to max out stats and stuff like that.
I will say one of the nice things they changed is they did allow, so something that Persona 3 Portable did for the female protagonist is and didn't do it for the male protagonist for some reason. They let the female protagonist basically go the platonic route with the guy social links that were romanceable. They, in this game, in Persona 3 Reload, they have made it so, despite the fact that it's male only, you can go a pure platonic route or just make that platonic choice, and it isn't detrimental to maxing out a social link.
Gotcha.
I think that is great. That I found out they did that. I'm like, that's amazing. That's great. That has always been probably the biggest hiccup is, there's just like the baggage you have of like the ethical and moral like complications of two-timing every woman in a Persona game. And like there being no consequences to it, really leads up to that. But, yeah, no, I think the reason why I think this is a great remake though, is it does capture that original Persona 3's game in a modern sense, which is like, oh, if you're looking for like the quote unquote pure Persona 3 experience, I think this fits that bill.
Mm-hmm.
But is this like the best that Persona 3 could be? I don't think so.
Yeah. Fortunately, we'll have, I know both of us are going to have another Persona like far higher on our lists. So,
yes, definitely.
we will circle back to Atlas when that time comes. For my first honorable mention, I'm going to throw out Fields of Mystria there. And Fields of Mystria is very much in an honorable mention state purely for the sake that it is early access, and I don't feel right kind of throwing an incomplete game in my overall rankings. If I did, this would be probably a top. It'd be easily a top 10 game for me this year. I loved my time with Fields of Mystria. I played it kind of in its very first early access like release before. I know they've added a patch since that has added a little bit more to it, kind of their first big patch, but I haven't circled back to it. But yeah, Fields of Mystria, if you don't know, is very much like a Harvest Moon-like, or Astoria Seasons, or Stardew Valley-like farming simulator. But this one has little bits of magic in it, so it's a little bit more maybe a Rune Factory. But it is very anime coded. Like all of the art of the characters is very like anime.
It's 90s anime too.
Yeah,
like
90s
it
anime,
like 80s and
very much.
90s. The like
Yeah.
outfit design and everything is like straight 80s 90s anime. It's so cool.
Great fun like collection of characters, but yeah, you like running around collecting different resources and stuff. The town has like a little the town basically right at the beginning has been struck by an earthquake, so like a bridge out of town that like lets the merchants come in for their weekly thing has been broken down, and so the like story mechanics of the game are, hey, you need to gather resources to help repair that bridge, or you need to gather resources to help renovate the inn, or like basically you're helping out the town. You've got like things that you're doing to level up that stuff in addition to the normal like, hey, yeah, if I want to add like a barn to my farm, I need those resources, all that stuff. It has a mine that you can dig into that has a lot of like extra little resources. They have a lot. They play into it's a good mashup of like the Harvest Moon stuff as well as like the Animal Crossing stuff. Or I remember we both got into what was the game a couple years back that was like the Polynesian the island.
Ooh.
Yeah, it's another one we played in early access and then like didn't circle back to when it actually came out. But like it's, hey, there's a museum that you can basically find artifacts and you collect bugs and basically
Coral Island,
thank you. Has those kinds of things, and like once you complete a set there, you've unlocked a furniture set that you can craft for yourself and decorate your home and all that stuff. And it was just a ton of fun. I had a great time. I kind of in the early access, some of the downs are like it only had one holiday really to play with right now, and at the time I was playing it, like you could only get up to I think like 4 hearts with all of the characters' romantic interests. The first new patch they did lets you get up to like 6, and similarly like you could only get to like level 40 in the mine, and now I think you can get to level 60 kind of thing. But it was still very fun, and yeah, you've like there's this ancient dragon being, and you have like a dragon statue on your farm that can like level up your abilities. So the more you do farming stuff, you'll kind of naturally earn points that you can pour into, okay, I want to upgrade this farming ability, so when I gather a crop, there's a chance that I will also gather the seed for that crop, so I don't need to spend
That's
as
cool.
much, rebuying stuff from the farm and stuff. So yeah, lots of fun there. And it was just a ton of fun, having a great time with it. And there's like a wanted board in town where like people will kind of say, hey, this is a thing I'm looking for, and you can go give it to them, and they'll give you some monetary reward, or they'll give you like a crafting recipe, or
Nice.
a cooking recipe or something like that. Lots of fun. Great kind of blend and evolution of all of those kinds of things, and it very much hit that like Stardew Valley itch that I was feeling this year, despite the fact that I also dove back into Stardew Valley twice this year.
Yeah.
This was a very weird year for me, where like there were lots of like starts and stops, where like beginning of the year I got hit with a few games that we'll talk about later, and
Yep.
then a long drought of like, okay, nothing new's coming out, so I was playing old games. I was going back to Stardew Valley. I was checking out something like Fields of Mystria here, and then like finally something would come, and there'd be like another 2 months where I'm like, okay, I can jump back in and play this again, kind of thing. But yeah, Fields of Mystria, honorable mention. But if it wasn't early access, like when it comes out of early access, and for the same reason, I didn't even jump into Hades 2. I've bought it
Same.
now. I picked it up because it was on sale. I was like, well, I might as well just
I didn't pick it
have
up.
it
I just haven't.
for when it eventually does
Yeah.
release. But I've not actually played Hades 2 because I knew that if I did, it was going to be like, well, that's an easy like top 10.
Yep.
But I don't want to put honorable mention or early access stuff kind of in my veins until they're actually out here in full release. But Fields of Mystria, lots of promise, and that is one that I definitely want to kind of keep an eye on when it does hit full release eventually, because I think it's fun, it's creative. The characters in the town, because there is like magic to them. There is like the witch character that like she runs the spa, but she'll also like fully like some of her heart story beats are like she'll just make you drink a potion that suddenly turns you into a llama or something like that. and like those are the cutscenes, and just fun little bits of stuff like that. Also one of my favorite elements of this that I think I talked about back when like I reviewed it, is like every Friday night, all of the people in town go, hang out at the inn, and you can basically go and talk to them, and they'll be broken out into like little groupings, and each week, like you will advance the story of that little group of people, including like, the kids are planning a little heist into somebody's room to, to investigate. A group of people are playing a Dungeons and Dragons TTRPG like kind of thing, and they're coming up with like their little stories, or
Houses and Humans. Yep.
yeah. And so lots of fun, just enjoying that element that is like, hey, here's getting to know these characters and letting these characters kind of interact with one another in a fun and interesting way that a lot of times these games don't necessarily have going for them, because it's all about your relationship with the characters rather than like their relationships with each other as well.
I think that's such a smart thing of like taking it that next step. Stardew Valley does have that sort of aspect to it, but you just see people hanging out. There's not a story going on, and so letting the game have and letting the characters have stories that are independent of you is such a cool idea of like, hey, time is passing. And people's relationships are developing and moving forward. Yeah. I think that's really cool.
Yeah. So shout out to Fields of Mystria. What do we want to throw for your next honorable mention there, Cam?
My next honorable mention, it ties into it. I have this is a good time to reintroduce one of my rules. My rule of what games can make it to my top 10 and which are ineligible are expansions, DLCs, and games that have not released a 1.0. So a game can still be in like early access or pre-release. If it has a 1.0, which is like the definitive, like this is our first version of the game, I will count it. If it's anything before that, so Fields of Mystria, for example, not a 1.0 game, not going to make my list. Yeah. To that point, though, is my first example of this is Final Fantasy XIV Dawn Trail.
Okay.
I said it back when I reviewed it earlier last year. This is going to be one of the your mileage may vary type of expansions for a couple of reasons. One is there's no way in hell that they were going to be able to give the full satisfaction follow-up to such a definitive end to the story that Endwalker was. Endwalker is the game that broke my rule, made it to number 1 of 2021.
Mine as well.
Yours as well. It was I believe it was also our sites.
No, because it was only you and I.
That's right, only you and I.
Like third that year.
Yeah.
Behind like I think like Final Fantasy because that was a different year than Remake. But it was like I think that was the Ghost of Tsushima year.
Oh, I think you're right. Yeah. Like yeah. So no, Ghost of Tsushima was the same year Hades came out.
Whatever it was. I was looking at it. Actually, I have it right here. Let me just pull it up. It's on a different tab in my doc right here. This was 2021, I guess.
Yep.
So our total. Emily is away 3.
That makes sense. Okay.
Yeah. It ended up being 4 because it had 20 points from you and I, but nobody else played it. Hitman 3 was number 3 that year. Deathloop was number 2, and Emily is Away 3 was our game of the year. I'd forgotten Emily is Away had won one of our game of the years. Shout out 2021.
Yeah, 2021. That was our game of the year, and like
again, it was like every one of us played it, so that was the one that really jumped out that year.
I believe it was also my number 2 game that year as well. So yeah,
indeed.
Yeah, it was. So Dawn Trail is not as good as Endwalker. Okay. Where do you go from Endwalker? Where do you go to like a decisive end of a 10-year story, right? Like where do you go from that? And where they decided to go is kind of going in a direction of having your character be a mentor to a new protagonist. And like for a lot of reasons, that people didn't like Stormblood, which was kind of like your character didn't feel like the main character of the story. That is also what's happening here. It does like there's lots of parts of the story that just like don't kind of just don't work. It's about a race to the throne, or a race for a throne of an entire continent, and there's a lot to really enjoy out of that game. But there is a lot of, I think, just when you're going from reality, like world-ending dilemmas to something such more narrowed and focused, like helping somebody get to the throne of an empire, because that's Final Fantasy, baby. Small potatoes aren't that small of potatoes in hindsight, or like in the larger scheme of things. But for Final Fantasy, helping somebody successfully do an event that will make them an emperor is, it's something. There's a lot of things about it, a lot of decisions that were made narratively that make sense, but just aren't exciting, aren't as interesting. So despite the fact that it got it's knocked out because it's a DLC or it's a Dawn Trail expansion, it is it's definitely not going to be anywhere near there to be able to break my rule. And also, it just even if it was, I don't know if it would really make the top 10. Mm-hmm. I gave it an 8, but that's because I felt like the post-campaign content at the time that I reviewed it was pretty good, and was shaping up to be really good. I'm still curious. I haven't gone and played the latest patch yet. I'm curious how that's continued to evolve. But as of right now, I think it's is it a great game? One of the best games of the year? For sure. But I think if you for the reasons I've already stated, it does have that kind of it's got the baggage of it put out the best expansion any MMO has ever had, in my opinion. Yeah. So
yeah, I didn't even bother jumping back in. And admittedly, it was already a hard enough pull to get me to get all the way through Endwalker in my MMO aversion in the first place back in 2021. But hey, it was a pandemic and I had time. So yeah, when Dawn Trail came out this year, I was like, the word of mouth isn't great enough for me to really want to jump back in and kind of devote myself to that, experience again. So, as also because it would also be very much it's going to be a struggle to relearn and refigure out how to play that game is I think the big thing for me. It's, an example was this year. One of the things I played, not anywhere on my list or anything like that, is I replayed the Horizon Zero Dawn remaster when that came out. Just was hey, I'm looking for something to play, so I just replayed that whole game. And I remember when the game originally came out, played through it, loved it, and then 6 months later, the Frozen Wilds DLC came out, jumped in, and that is endgame DLC, and it was a struggle to like relearn and re-remember all those mechanics at the end of the game when everything is like killing me in one shot kind of thing. Playing it in kind of a all-in-one experience this time around was a much smoother run because I had spent the hours building up and relearning everything and didn't need to like dive straight into the level 60 stuff there at the end. Like jumping into Dawn Trail and having to like re-remember how to like what the pattern of stuff I needed to do as a black mage would have been.
Sure.
That would have been, I'm sure, a bit of a struggle for me. Not my cup of tea, but I'm glad you had fun with it. Nonetheless.
Yeah, I also want to put out there as a caveat: none of my complaints have anything to do with Wooklamot or the controversy surrounding Wooklamot. Wooklamot is the first person voiced by a trans actress. The voice actress for Wooklamot is trans. There's been and this is the sad part about things, is there is just an enormous amount of vitriol and hate coming from the anti-woke, anti-DEI crowd. I think the performance overall was more than fine, good at times even. And that was never one of my complaints about it.
Yeah.
Wooklamot as a character does feel like there are moments where I feel like it struggles, but I think it struggles because of a lot of reasons that have nothing to do with the performance. It's just the story and narrative is just weaker than Endwalker. But I mean, like, so it's like my expectations were not Endwalker level expectations, but I was like, even story wise, I was still a little like let down by the overall story. And because Wooklamot is the central character, a lot like Lise, if you remember, I told you I was like, Lise gets a lot of hate from the fandom.
Fuck that fandom.
Yep.
Lise is one of my favorites.
Lise is one of your favorites for sure. I didn't hate Lise, but also like I wasn't too interested. I was like, but I think a lot of it comes down to people playing through Final Fantasy XIV unfortunately develop main character syndrome. And so when they're not the main character and they're not the focus, everything's not about them, they lose interest. And because they're losing interest, they're like, oh, this must be bad.
They must really hate Thancred then, or the twins.
Some do. Yeah. Some straight up do. Like, it's its own thing. But I think that Wooklamot, because one of the things, she is brand new. They introduced her in the last patch of Endwalker's expansion. She's brand new. She's given a lot of focus, and there's a lot of like emphasis put on her as a character. And so because she's not this tremendous character, it does fall a little flat in certain places. But
yeah, I mean, I'll throw out there, I think if somehow you are, this is the first thing you're ever hearing from us, I think we're well on the record of trans rights are human rights.
100%.
Fuck TERFs.
Fuck TERFs. Fuck.
Absolutely. Fuck anybody that like, uses woke as a pejorative and shit like that. Like, grow the fuck up. Enjoy games. Don't be pieces of shit. I wouldn't have even thought like, oh, of course Cameron's criticism has something to do with that, because I know you well enough.
Anybody who listens to us long enough knows that, once again, trans rights are human rights. Fuck TERFs always.
Yeah.
I also go a lot farther than you a lot of times with certain things. But when it comes to like Wooklamot, and I think as a quality wise, not the greatest, but I'm really hoping that over the course of these next patches, we do get further development as, I don't want to spoil anything, but also at the same time, like, it's kind of obvious you're backing her. She becomes the ruler of the country. What happens after she becomes ruler is where I think the story gets like really, really good, but everything leading up to that feels a little bit like a chore, that you're doing checklists of like visiting places, doing quests and stuff.
Having not played it, that sounded like, I don't want to spoil anything, but here's a big spoiler.
I kind of did, but at the same time, it shouldn't, like, how
if
they
you
get
know story
there,
structure, you know where that's going to go.
Yeah, you know where it's going to go. Also, if you're anyway. But yeah, and so Dawn Trail is like really, really good.
Yeah.
It's a really good video game. The expansion, I think the post campaign stuff is like sets up like a very cool story setting for the post for the post-campaign patch content going forward. And I can't wait to see what they continue to do next.
So I'm going to jump into one here, which I imagine is going to be higher on your list. So I have another one to throw out there as well. Indiana Jones and the Great Circle is one of my
higher on my
mentions.
list.
So yeah, we'll talk about it in a little bit.
Yep.
Didn't quite make my top 10, but it's pretty close. The one that is just outside my top 10 that I want to give a little bit of love to is Open Roads.
Ooh.
This was a game that ended up kind of being like put out with little ultimate fanfare this year, which was a disappointment, in large part because it got wrapped up in the whole Steve Gaynor Fulbright stuff. Like, this was originally a Fulbright game back when it was first announced. And then a couple years ago, there was a big expose that was like, hey, Steve Gaynor, kind of not a great leader, toxic behavior, all that stuff.
Shit he got to work with.
So he, in order to try and like salvage the game, basically pulled himself off this game, and this game spun off and was no longer a Fulbright game and was a game from the Open Roads team, published by Annapurna Interactive, back before Annapurna completely lost all of their staff later this year. But this is one I'd had on my radar because I enjoyed those old the old Fulbright games, and it also had kind of the dual cast of Caitlin Dever and Kerry Russell as like mother-daughter pairing in this one. This is a game about this mother and daughter. It's also like, in my write-up, I go into like, this is a tailor-made for Trevor kind of game, because much like Lady Bird from a few years ago, the movie, it is set 2003, which is when I graduated high school. So like, all of that has like Trevor coded nostalgia immediately, which also Lady Bird was set in 2003. And so the mother and daughter kind of like clearing out the grandmother's house. The grandmother's just passed.
This is really hitting notes on you, man.
Yeah. It was very much like, and they, in cleaning out the house, they kind of uncover like this mystery, and they find these letters to the grandmother from like a former lover, a mysterious, lover kind of thing. And they go and investigate, in like the old summer home that they used to, go to. And, it's a walking sim, so you're just going around, you're picking up things, you're interacting with stuff like that. But like, at the old summer home, like the mom's old, VW Bug that like she lived in as her room at the summer home, because there's no air conditioning. It was like only a summer home anyway, kind of thing. So like, even that, there's like a whole bunch of like memories of like the summer trips that my family would take to like the White Mountains, and kind of experience that like cabin life kind of experience. One of the key like pieces of furniture is like a roll top desk that you open, and my family had that exact same roll top desk when I was growing up. And so like, so much of this was like just hitting all of my nostalgia beats. It's a great it's already like a great mother-daughter bonding road trip kind of story. The mystery that you're kind of uncovering as you go is fun. It's in the same vein of you're Gone Home, kind of like what's really happening here, what's, uncovering the story from the different artifacts you're finding. The fact that this is voiced by Caitlin Dever and Kerry Russell gives you a little bit of extra, like you pick up something and the two of them have like a little scene talking about, an item you've picked up or some revelation you find or something like that. So it was a lot of fun. And I played it early on. Again, it came to Game Pass like basically when it launched quietly back in I think February or March or something. Yeah, February. And just kind of like came out and nobody was really talking about it, I felt. And it didn't get like a big push, in I think part because there was kind of that controversial lineage behind it. But I really enjoyed it for what it was and the kind of story it was. It also, coming out in February, it was, in the wake of Final Fantasy VII Rebirth or something like that. So, eyes were on a lot of the bigger offerings at the time as well. But this was something I really enjoyed. And it was very, very, very coded to like my own personal experiences, my own personal like timeline of things. Because much like, when we would go back and play like an Emily is Away, like so much of that hits such a very particular point in time that it's impossible to like extract my own, like the game starts and you're kind of wandering around the girls' bedroom, mostly boxed up because they're clearing out the house kind of thing. But like, you find like a clear, like, they don't use Blockbuster, but it's very clearly like a Blockbuster DVD case or something like that, rental case that had never been returned, and finding a game, like a game CD or something like that. So yeah, I had so much fun, kind of like taking that little trip down nostalgia lane in Open Roads. And yeah, just a great little mother-daughter bonding story at the heart of it. Great performances, and just kind of another in the great vein of those like walking sims, pick up items and kind of like explore, solve little mystery puzzles and stuff like that. So yeah, Open Roads, one of my honorable mentions. I'll throw it back to you for your next one, Cam.
All right, my next one is going to be for Pokemon, the trading card game Pocket.
I also have it in my honorable mentions, so yeah.
Gotcha. Okay. Well, we can both discuss it here.
Indeed.
Yeah, I think the biggest like success about this game is that it succeeds in capturing the feeling of the late 90s and early 2000s of like the Pokemon craze, of what it meant to be collecting these cards. It's using the same, right there.
I'm pointing to my binder of Pokemon cards behind me.
Yep. It's something that I like. The way that the game works and the way it's built out is very much reminds me of Magic: The Gathering Arena. And so if you're familiar with that, but you haven't touched Pokemon Trading Card Pocket, I'd say it's a very good one-to-one kind of comparison of like how it's laid out, the way it's set up. It's very much following that formula. Because of that, I think it's a super easy to access, easy to get into, easy to like really fall head over into it. And like, I'm not surprised at all that people are spending ludicrous amounts of money chasing cards. It makes sense. That's part of the appeal. Shout out to the whales out there who are funding all of our mobile games for us. You're the real ones. We appreciate you.
I mean, I've definitely put more than my fair share into this game. Yeah.
As somebody who is on unemployment, that is like, I've made questionable decisions with my unemployment money regarding buying things. Not lately. I think I made like one big purchase. I spent like $20 and like got a full, like everything I bought was like whiffs. And so I was like, okay, like,
yeah, and
I
therein
can't
lies
do
the
this
problem of this game.
Yeah, that's the problem of this game.
All right, yeah, I opened 10 packs, didn't get a single new card. All right, well, what the hell? That was a waste of my time.
When I say I had, like, I did it to buy 10 packs, and all 10 packs were whiffs. Like, no rares, just common cards, nothing but, like, single to triple diamond, not even on any haul, like, just not good.
Yep.
It was not good. And after that point, I said, I'm not spending another dime on this game. And since then, I've been like, good. I play it every day. I open my 4 packs. And I made the decision, hey, I'm not moving on to the Mew pack until I get the immersive Mewtwo. Guess what? I got the immersive Mewtwo.
You finally got it?
Finally got it. I moved on to the new packs starting yesterday. 2 days ago is when I pulled it, and I was like, cool. It was on my last pack out of the 4 free packs that you get a day, which is another thing too. Shout out to them giving you so many free packs a day.
How do you get 4? I think I only get 3. You get 2 from like the one, and then you get 1 from like the if you're like the premium.
Oh, I'm
package.
premium.
Yeah, so you get 3 free packs a day because it's like 12 hours a pack for the other 2.
Oh, so I wait full 24.
Okay, so you have like you're basically like piling up the 2 from the previous day or whatever.
Yep.
Okay.
Every 24 hours, you get 2 of those packs, and then it's
3. It's like you're getting the baseline is like you get 1 pack every 12 hours. That's what you standard get, and then you get an extra pack once every 24 hours if you're like the Google Plus or Google Play, whatever premium thing. Monthly subscription.
I get 2, so I don't know.
Okay.
I may be wrong about that. I get 4 packs a day. That's how much I get. I may be wrong. I don't know. To be fair, I do it before I go to bed. So maybe I'm just opening 3 and I think I'm opening 4. I don't know.
Yeah.
Anyway, I moved on to the Mew ones yesterday. Tonight when I go to bed, I will be opening up more Mew packs. Gotta say, I'm just still loving it. It's still such a it has so much focus, a good focus on collectability. But then what they've also done is they updated the actual game itself, using a pool system for energy.
Gonna open myself a pack while you're talking.
There you go. Opening up the pool for energy instead of forcing you to use energy cards, limiting decks to only a certain number of cards makes the games go by so quicker. And also, like, there's definitive moments where you're like, okay, no, I'm not going to win from this, and you can just concede and end it. There you go.
Yep.
Hey,
we got a kabuto or a pincer rather.
Pincer
full art. Cool.
Yep.
I already have all of those cards, but still.
Yeah, nice. It's just such a cool. It feels like it's a throwback while at the same time being modern. I think this is the best the trading card game has ever played and felt playing it. Like, you're never at risk of like, oh, I'm not drawing the right energy or everything. If you do a multicolored deck, then you run into
then you struggle with that a little bit. Yeah.
You struggle with that a little bit, but it's not the same as drawing cards. So every time you draw, every turn, you're getting an actual card and not any energy cards.
Yeah.
Really helps. Like, the pace of games is faster. They feel better. Like, the play of it is, because it's such limited sets, feels very predictable. Like, if I can't come back from behind at this point, I need to just concede because I'm not coming back from it.
Yeah.
I did not do it. I'm not doing it for this current season, but for season 0, I did the full, like, I got 45 wins, got my ribbon for it, and then they're like, hey, you want to do it again? I'm like, no, I'm good.
Yeah. Same.
Just not worth it. I did it just to be like, for the first season 0, I got that ribbon.
I've already fully completed the Blastoise event though, so I've got that all
nice,
complete.
And that's something too. You've been playing the PvE events.
Yeah, I love the PvE stuff.
The PvE stuff is what you like. PvE that you've been doing is phenomenal.
Yeah,
and even PvP stuff is fun. Like, you don't want to touch that because you don't care for it. But like, it's the fact that they set you up with challenges and things like that, and they're doing regular events. Regular stuff is going on.
Yeah. Like on the PvE front, I've got all of the challenges, including when they did the new Mew deck. Like, they gave a whole bunch of new challenges for that. I've got 100% of the challenges done, and so yeah, when they do like here's the drop event PvE stuff, I do those too, and I love those, especially because those ones at least come with like the little reward of like, you get a card or a chance for one of their little promo cards. Whereas like, I just feel like there's no benefit from the PvE stuff. It just doesn't do anything for me, so, because I don't care enough about like the little emblem thing.
Yep.
But yeah, the PvE stuff I like because it also gives me a chance to like explore different deck types or come up with different strategies. Especially like, I like the PvE challenges where it is like, hey, defeat this deck with, no cards higher than a 3 diamond ranking. Because then I'm like, okay, I can't just rely on my, Pikachu EXs or my Mewtwo EX or whatever, that like my goated, decks that can run the numbers. It's like, okay, I gotta strategically think what's gonna work, what can like survive if they build up enough stuff, what's gonna work in this situation. So yeah, I really enjoy that. I am very much in the, as we touched on, like looking through, I've got on the Mew side of things, I've got all of those cards.
Nice.
Except like, I've got all of the base cards there. I've got like the full 68 out of 68 there. I've got 6 of the stars, and then I've got the crown golden Mew from that deck. But yeah, I've got like the immersive Celebi there. I've got the gold Mew from that deck. So like, I'm feeling good about that deck. I don't really need to like pour points into that deck anymore. But like, in the original like Charizard, Pikachu, and Mewtwo decks, I'm missing 2 of the base 226 cards there. One of them is the base Charizard EX, and then one is Gyarados. But then even there, I have like all of the immersives on that one. I have the gold Pikachu and the gold Charizard in that deck. So it really is like, I pulled last night the like full art hologram Sabrina. And that's like the first new card I'd gotten in probably like a week.
Full art gym trainers are sick.
Yeah.
Love them.
I've got half of them. I've got Koga, I've got Giovanni, I've got Brock, and I've now got Sabrina.
One time I was in a match with somebody who was running a star Starmie EX deck,
Mm-hmm.
and they drew and played all 3 of their Misties. Didn't get a single energy out of any of them.
Ooh, ouch. I think you can only have 2.
2, maybe it was 2.
I think you're limited to like 2 of a card.
Oh, that makes sense.
Two,
Yeah, no.
Two of that card per, like.
No, you can do 3.
No, you can't.
You play more than me. You know.
Like, yeah, if you're building a deck, it's going to cap you out at 2. You can't put more than 2 of the same type of card in there.
Right on. Yep. Anyway, both times Misty came up with nothing for him.
Yeah,
so
that's
brutal.
I got because one of the EVs in the new deck has like a for one thing you'll flip a coin and you flip until you get tails, but for every heads you do 20 damage. The game the CPU gave me 10 heads in a row on the for the enemy killing me, easily one-shotting any Pokemon I had. The odds of that are 1 in 1024. A day later, another one did like 9 heads in a row. And I'm like, all right, go fuck yourself, you cheating piece of shit game.
Nice.
Good thing this is like, there's no penalty for like CPU like playing against the computer kind of stuff. But like, all right, that's absolute horseshit that like you got that many heads in a row.
For sure.
Statistically, an impossibility. Not actually impossible, but we know that this is doctored. So yeah, I have my gripes with the game in that regard. And definitely some of the odds seem to be like, I feel like the thing that that gripes me all the time is that you get 5 cards in a pack. Anytime you get duplicate cards within one pack, absolute horseshit. I've gotten on at least 2 occasions 2 sets of duplicate cards in a pack. So I've got like 1 card and then 2 of the same card and then 2 of the other card or something like that. And it's like, what the fuck? What the hell is this? Like, that should not be possible. That like the game should be, building the decks out in a way that does not allow that to happen. So some bullshit there, but it like, to this game's credit, and the reason it's an honorable mention of mine, and I don't want to throw it into like actual top 20 even of my listings, is I don't like the monetization business model, especially just as somebody that like can easily succumb to it. I think it is absolutely preying on FOMO
it's predatory for sure.
and predatory microtransactions. I appreciate that this one isn't throwing a million different like ads in your face.
Also,
every time you
it
log
only
in
has a single currency that it uses. It doesn't have. Yep. That was my problem with.
Yeah, the fact that they have like different currencies among the different packs in terms of like if you want to buy cards, you have to have opened cards in the mythical Pokemon pack instead of the EX packs or whatever they call them. I don't remember, the Apex packs. But yeah, the fact that it's you're only buying gold. That's all you can buy. Yep. You can't buy, any of the other stuff. That is nice, and so
that's super nice, but
isn't as predatory as other things, but it's still plenty predatory.
Yep,
and
it's less predatory than Pokemon EX Masters.
Sure,
which was like a game that when I was writing for Handsome Phantom, I tore the shit out of because I was so disappointed in it. I just absolutely eviscerated that entire game in an article once.
Yeah. Also, in the Mythical Island stuff, I'm like, I have no idea. I mean, like already in the base Apex stuff, I know the Kanto Pokemon, and then I don't know half of the ones that are non-Kanto, and that has gone even further in the Mystical Island stuff. I'm like, some of these, I feel like you're just trolling me, and some of these aren't really Pokemon.
I'm telling you, the sentient beach trash is in fact a real Pokemon.
I know Garbodor.
Excuse me, Cameron. I know Garbodor.
I know some of them that are ridiculously stupid. I know there's a keychain Pokemon. I know. But like, it's still wild, and just some of these I'm just like, I feel like you've thrown a Digimon in here, and I wouldn't know the difference. But anyway,
they get close sometimes. Design wise, they get pretty close.
Sure. Yeah. So shout out to Pokemon TCG Pocket. Both of us having some fun with that one. And yeah, I do appreciate that they've added plenty of updates and new stuff in to keep it fresh, despite the fact that I am just kind of at this point holding up the hourglasses until they release another new set, because there's no point in really like pouring 10 packs into ones where I'm like hoping for one of two cards really. So yeah, no real point in diving too much more in until they give us more. So I only have two more honorable mentions, and I can kind of throw them into one bucket. What do you have in terms of honorable mention stuff still to come?
Oh, you know what? I apologize. Indiana Jones and the Great Circle is an honorable mention of mine.
Oh, it is. It didn't quite make the top 10?
Nope, it got bounced at the last minute when I was going over
Marvel rivals. Yeah, all right. Cool. Then yeah, let's talk Indiana Jones and the Great Circle now.
Sure.
Because I this ultimately it was like it's my number 12 overall for the game.
It's my number
like
11
number 11
at this point.
So yeah, I'll toss it to you first in
Sure.
terms of like slightly higher ranking.
Straightforward, just gonna say it. This is the third or fourth best Indiana Jones story you're ever gonna find. I haven't finished it yet. I put in. Trevor knows I was here playing it. I worked my way through the introduction level and the Vatican, which is you said is like a third of the way through the game.
Yep.
I can easily say, just based off of that experience alone, certainly better than Temple of Doom.
Yeah.
And right now, currently, better than Kingdom of the Crystal Skull. And then, if is it better than Indiana Jones 5, which is the name I can't remember right now?
Dial of Destiny.
Dial of Destiny. Maybe better than Dial of Destiny. Like it's at that point where it could be, depending on how the story goes. Really, I've fallen in love with Troy Baker as Indiana Jones.
Yep.
This is in my opinion, this is, if the man already hasn't had enough of them, this is another career-defining performance for him. I think it's up there with one of his best ones, and the fact that it's an imitation of somebody else's voice is beyond impressive. Like, this guy Troy Baker already was one of the best voice actors of all time. This might seal him as like goated for sure. He just delivers on it. The overall cast is delivering on it. Story-wise, I'm really fascinated by it. And this is despite the fact that I don't know anything about the Great Circle.
I feel like it's a thing they made up for the game.
It feels that way. Certainly name-wise, it feels that way.
Yeah.
Let's be very real here. Temple of Doom, Raiders of the Lost Ark, The Last Crusade, Kingdom of the Crystal Skull, The Dial of Destiny. This is by far the weakest named one for sure.
The Great Circle.
The Great Circle. It's super, like, I understand it's crazy that they don't even introduce the big premise until like the end of the first area.
Yeah.
Because they make no mention of it because you're there trying to retrieve an artifact. And then it turns out that was a bigger lead to something else, which is typical Indiana Jones. It's delivering on all the right numbers. The only downside is, man, outside of stealth, I feel like stealth takedowns and surprise attacks, like they haven't, like you're surprising them because stealth failed or whatever, for whatever reason, they're surprised by you. Those experiences in combat still feel good. Anything after that feels terrible.
Yeah.
I fought that boss and I told you afterwards, I was like, I understand completely what you mean by now. Holy crap. It's the boss fight and anything with like more than one or two people where you end up having to do like a prolonged like firefighter gunfight. Terrible. Feels terrible.
Yeah.
I cannot believe that I'm saying this. Machine Games did not deliver on the gunplay whatsoever, which is crazy because they're Machine Games and they made Wolfenstein and Wolfenstein 2 and that are like surreal and great first person experiences. And you thought, like, I thought it would translate. It does not. Accidentally hit that on accident. Does not translate. And it's brutal. Absolutely brutal for this game. Overall, like, I appreciate minimalist UI. I like that the map is something you can look down at and then, like, look up at. And, like, it's interactive and moving. I love that aspect of it. I didn't fast travel at all in the Vatican. I didn't want to fast travel. I really appreciated as you unlock new areas, other areas got closed off, and so you'd have to find like alternative ways around them. I'm sure a lot of people were just like, oh, I'll just fast travel over this area, whatever. But I had just such a great experience being fully immersed in that walking sim aspect of Indiana Jones. The walking sim aspect of this game is insane.
Yeah, for me, it was much more like, okay, I'm 100%ing this area, so I'm going to fast travel to where the thing is. I'm not going to walk all the way across from this, through 3 courtyards to get to the next thing I want to get to.
I did main quests and side quests. I'm not worried about collectibles.
Yeah.
So I didn't worry, which is kind of funny. It's like, you think, oh, I don't want to fast travel because I don't want to miss anything. No, I just didn't want to fast travel because I appreciated just going into areas where I had to throw on the frock. And you have the little where he, fixes his cuffs.
Yep.
To give you the signal that you're in that costume. I loved all of it. I thought it was fantastic.
Did you get in the Vatican area the the I don't remember what they call them, like the Black Guard? I think it's Black Guard. Did you get that outfit too?
Nope.
Okay, yeah. There's basically in each of the areas you can find basically like the enemy's outfit, so you can walk into like their camps, and as long as you're not walking by like a captain, you'll be.
So you could get like the
undercover stuff.
It's the fascist, the black, that their uniform. Yeah, no, it didn't do that.
Yep.
Because otherwise the captain recognizes that you're not a priest.
I mean the captain recognizes also that you're not a soldier kind of thing.
Okay.
So there are some people that like, even if you're like in the disguise, it's not going to work if you get too close kind of thing. But like, yeah, there's a Black Guard outfit that in the Vatican you can walk, into the fascist camp and not be, not because like the fascists aren't going to let you walk into the camp
prison
as,
and
like,
everything.
as Indy or as the
priest.
Yeah. So, but yeah, that ended up being like oh, cool. That's a fun little extra thing. Okay, now I can jump in there and I can find some of the secrets that are in those areas that otherwise were inaccessible unless I wanted to do a lot of mayhem.
Sure. I just stealthed into those areas and took out the solo dudes that I needed to.
Yeah.
Overall, like I said, great experience moving through the game and like interacting with the world. Anytime it comes to like straight up combat, just terrible. That's the only reason why it didn't make my top 10.
Yeah, I'm largely in the same boat. Having finished it, this is my third favorite Indiana story, behind Raiders of the Lost Ark and Last Crusade. And I think, great performances all around. Great, like they nail the indie-ness of the story, the adventure, all of that. And it really is just the moment-to-moment gameplay that, while I appreciate like the Dishonored vibes that it has, as a huge fan of this Dishonored games and like the immersive simness, it just does all of that to such a lesser degree that struggles. And so, it is like, okay, it's still always fun to, bash a fascist in with like a hammer or something like that. But if you don't do that and now you've got 3 of them shooting at you, all right, you got to run away or you're just going to go down and respawn and, go and do the next thing. Because it is like bad in the firefights, the fist fighting, especially because you get into places where it's like, okay, I can only fist fight this boss, and this boss has a crazy high health bar or something like that, and okay, this is a struggle. And it just like it sucks the fun out of because of the gameplay, and that's never a great experience. And especially like the end of the game absolutely suffers from that kind of problem too, in a way that wasn't fun. But overall, there's a lot of fun for me. Some of the zones, especially like the Egypt zone and then the Southeast Asian zone that you get kind of late in the game, the jungle kind of third act, are overly long, overly big. Especially the jungle one, where it is like, okay, it's a whole bunch of islands, interspersed with a river, and so you're like, that's where fast travel really comes in handy, because I don't want to jump in the boat and slowly like maneuver through the river to the point that I want to be at. I just want to fast travel to the point that I want to be at.
Sure.
So that's where a lot of that, but like the puzzles and stuff, I think I had a lot of fun with the puzzles, especially puzzles where it does a lot of those, like, okay, you'll find a note nearby and it doesn't completely spell out the answer in that note. You have to use your brain a little bit and decipher, okay, they've given me all the clues in these couple of pieces of information, and now I need to solve what the code is to open this chest to get some money or to get whatever I want to get there. I really enjoyed that. Lots of fun to be had in this game. Just its weakest aspect is absolutely like the gameplay itself, the minute to minute, like running around doing combat stuff like that, feels slow, sluggish. I don't think it's served from the first personness of it all. I think this would have been like if you had just been third person over the shoulder indie the whole time. I think it would have been a funner experience as opposed to this weird, like, okay, you're first person, but then when you throw your whip out, suddenly you zoom out to third person to swing on something, and then you go back into first person. It's like, this is weird. Climbing ladders, jumping out to third person, then coming back into first person. Just a weird vibe that was very much like, okay, they want to remind you over and over again that you're Indiana Jones. But it's like, either keep it first person or keep it third person. Like there were plenty of times in first person where I would see my shadow with the fedora and be like, "Yeah, I'm Indiana Jones." I didn't benefit from,
or going in front of like a reflective surface or something. Like
and obviously plenty of cutscenes and stuff.
Yep.
Remind you're Indiana Jones. So.
I think that zooming out to third person was just completely unnecessary. I agree with you on that. I think it should have been kept first person the entire time. I am a fan of the first person because I want to feel like I'm Indiana Jones. Like that aspect of the game, they nail so hard when it zooms out to show, oh yeah, hey, you're Indiana Jones. Oh, the whip across. It's like, I would have preferred to do the whip and then be in first person so that when you, like, if it's a scary thing, you're not going to make it. It's a little bit scarier because you're in first person. Like, I would have preferred that than like the other stuff. But yeah, that's just me.
In my write-up, one of the biggest crimes of the fact that the gunplay feels like so bad in this, that I call out in my write-up is there is no point in this game where you feel like the Indiana Jones from Raiders of the Lost Ark, where the swordsman is swinging his sword and Indiana Jones just one-shots him and it's like done. Like you never get that moment in this game, which is I feel incredibly frustrating.
With the gunplay, I would have preferred if they said, hey, you only have like 6 or 8 bullets for the entire level. Mm-hmm. How do you want to use them? Yeah. Like that I would love more.
I mean, I think that like the game does do that a lot where you are very sparse. And even if like you're picking up weapons, like you can't like reload an enemy's weapon with more bullets from their thing. You have to pick up another one of their guns. And
I like that aspect of it.
Whatever's in that clip. And it's like, cool. Especially like I do like that. Okay. Yeah. If they got a few shots off, when you pick up that gun, it's missing a few bullets and you do not have like the full swath of that. But it's the fact that like, those bullets do nothing. So it makes it all feel meaningless anyway. Yeah. That is the big disappointment. Do you have any other honorable mentions, or was that the
I do have a
one,
couple.
right?
I have 2 more.
Okay. So one that I will throw out there, I talked about it a little bit already with Fields of Mystery, but Stardew Valley patch 1.6, jumping back into Stardew Valley this year a couple times. One, when 1.6 released, I didn't realize that it was only releasing on PC, so I jumped in and was then like re-jumped into a game on PS5 and just like played 2 years worth of Stardew Valley, not realizing I didn't have that new patch because it still had plenty of new patches and new content that I hadn't played since when I first originally played the game. So I still had like plenty of time. But then I finally, like halfway through the year, I jumped in and played on my Steam Deck as well and played through like the 1.6 stuff too. And yeah, just a ton of fun. Like I love that he's continued to, the Concerned Ape has continued to support that game. And as much as I would love to also see the Haunted Chocolatier that he's working on, the fact that he continues to give Stardew love and put new stuff into it, a ton of fun. And that game is still just golden and great. So shout outs to Stardew Valley patch 1.6, reinvigorating or giving me a reason to jump back into Stardew Valley this year when I was looking for other things to play and nothing was really scratching that itch. So I'll throw it back to you for another one of your honorable mentions.
Yeah, my next honorable mention is Power World. Okay. Earlier this year, if you listen to our podcast, I talked a lot about Power World. It's a lot more than just Pokemon with guns. There is a lot of...
it's so weird. Like that feels like... It feels like
it was last year.
I mean, 2024 feels like it had a few flash in the pan games, and that was such a like flash in the pan. Like everybody's talking about Power World at the beginning of the year, and then like Helldivers came, and nobody was talking about Power World anymore.
It very much feels that way. Even looking back, I was doing a little bit of research. I was like, when did I stop talking about Power? Oh, when Helldivers 2 came out. It very much was that game. It does hide a really like a pretty dang good settlement builder sim behind its like the allure of the Pokemon-esque stuff, to the point where the majority of that game isn't really about capturing creatures. It's way more about taking the creatures you do capture,
using those creatures as your slave,
your slaves. Yeah. It's not about dogfight. It's not about dogfighting with your creatures. It's about using them for slave labor. Yeah. A lot of that aspects of it also, like, you know, taking care of them, like building up automatic, like, automation around them so that they are always fed and everything's always good with them. Just really paved the way, I think, for like, and what I've seen from what they've talked about lately about like future content stuff they were talking about even before the Pokemon lawsuit, was how they're moving, the direction they're moving in is far, like, the thing to get people's attention, Pokemon with guns, that was done with. They're not bothering with that anymore. There's no deeper sense of pursuing that. It's much more about exploration and building in this world now.
I remember during the Game Awards, there was like a Pal World like expansion like trailer thing that was in there, and like it had so few of like the Pokemon things, and it was all about like the like action and stuff like that it felt like they were actively trying to like not piss off Nintendo lawyers.
That's what mid game to end game looks like in Power.
Yeah.
Like that's what it looks like. Yeah, it's way more about encountering danger and taking danger on as an adventurer, basically. And it's way more about that. I wish there was more story to it. That's another thing that also like turned me off, that I fell off from it. But by the time you get to the mid game, which is where I got to before I bounced off of it, like I had guns. My Power World pals had guns. We were rolling in and attacking the enemy orgs that were like they attacked, like, oh, an enemy organization is attacking a town. Well, I'm gonna go save that town. I would go in, and like it was way more about that, about basically being the hero of this world, and taking on like the towers that are like gym battles. They're like, well, the towers are like gym battles. It's like, no, they're raids. They're raids you do with other players. You can do them by yourself. They're way harder, way harder, but you can do them by yourself too. It really is more about, it's more like Valheim and Ark, not Ark.
I think Ark's
Ark's the one I was thinking of. Icarus, like any of these other like survival settlement builder games, that's what this is like. Way more than it's like Pokemon.
Yeah.
The Pokemon like quote unquote aesthetic is just there to capture your attention at first. And also they make adorable little creatures. Really had a really fun time with the game. We'll see where it goes from there. I think that and another thing I want to point out is the reason why they're being sued is because of the capture mechanic. Because having a sphere that captures a creature is currently being like Pokemon companies claiming that as a patent for mechanical purposes.
Gotcha.
So it's like that's their avenue for it, because otherwise anybody who spends any substantial amount of time in Power World will tell you the Pokemon aspect of it like is there at the beginning, and then like it's the way you capture more creatures, and it's the way you carry creatures in storage. But outside of that, this is not about like, I'm a kid going through my adventure, yay. It's action. It's packed with just like adventure. That's what this game's about.
Sure. So, cool. So my last honorable mention here, no surprise, Baldur's Gate 3 mods.
There we go.
I had so much fun. My game of the year last year, Baldur's Gate 3, obviously. My favorite game of all time, Baldur's Gate 3. Just absolutely like continuing to give me new reasons to play as Larry and continue to support it, and including and most impactfully this year, adding full mod support within the game itself. And so being able to like unlock my party limit and have all of my party around with me, all the time, being able to unlock the level limit and being able to get up to level 20.
Yep.
And unlocking the inspiration cap. So instead of being locked at 4 inspirations at any given time, you're getting inspiration. I ended my, playthrough with 200 plus inspirations still sitting.
Nice.
So if I ever failed a roll, I had plenty of backups to keep going. Like unlocking character or carry limits and stuff like that. So many things that were just like fun quality of life cheats that made it so easy to jump back in. Another playthrough now, I've doing they've got like an officially supported like here's 150 more spells in the game.
Nice.
And it adds stuff from Tasha's Cauldron Xanathar's Guide, and like Silvery Barbs is in there from Strixhaven or whatever. Like, you can run around there. And it's just so much fun to jump in. Shout out to like the people that are creating their own areas and their own levels, and like this will be a fun game to continue to jump into and play, because people are continuing to go nuts with it. Like jumping in and playing it again. I played as a drow this time, which has a whole bunch of unique, because they're like the most like. They are the most racially abused against, probably like the most racist conversations happen against drow characters. Like there was I walked
and
up
from drow characters
too. Yeah. I walked up to an area where like normally everybody's like completely fine, or they'll engage in a conversation with you. And there were places where like just because I was a drow, immediately went into combat and they did not want to talk to me. They would not talk to me at all. But then there were also other places where like I got to completely get out of a fight because as a drow, it was like, you are a male drow and I'm a female drow, and in our society, like you have to listen to me, and that got somebody to shut the hell up. So it was like that was a cool new like aspect that I got to enjoy. But then also because I had my whole party running around with me, it made all like that and all like the level ups and stuff like that. I was easily like one, killing every encounter in like one round of combat kind of thing. And there are like mods that will like increase the difficulty accordingly if you want that. I was like, I don't care about that. I just want to have everybody with me. But the fact that it was like, okay, I'm getting party banter that I didn't get before because I wasn't always running around with Gale or with Will in my party. So getting to hear how they interact with some of my other characters. Finally got Minthara as a companion in this run, so I had a ton of fun with that, and getting to like hear her backstory and hear how she got in with the Absolute and all that stuff was fascinating and really cool, especially for like the first 3 playthroughs I had where I just like completely killed her in the goblin camp, and that was it. That's her story done. I love that there was so much more to experience here. And so had a ton of fun kind of like having a reason to jump back into this game, having a whole bunch of new stuff that like mod support stuff, like a lot of it, even aesthetic stuff, just jumping in and being like, okay, cool, like I'm playing around with dyes this time around. I'm having
nice.
I'm having Shadowheart run around in this dye that is very much like Char, flavored, so she's now in a whole bunch of dark gear. I've got Gale running around in gear that is like flavored with Mistra colors, and so like he's running around with a bunch of blues and stuff now. Purples. Yeah. Karlach running around with like Asmodeus from the Hells kind of colors. Obviously she doesn't want that, but that's what she's flavored with, and just so much fun. And exploring the different options that I hadn't made in the past, or and diving into some of those just the different endless variation that Baldur's Gate has, having all these mods available to make it add new things, add new fun to it. Just a lot of great times. So shout outs to mods giving me more reasons to go back to Baldur's Gate 3 this year. Not that I really needed them, but did it anyway and had a ton of fun.
That's awesome, man. It was both of our game of the year. Not last year, year before.
Yep,
no, it was last year.
Yep.
2023 game of the year for both of us. It is, it's the definitive like RPG experience, I feel. So the fact that you spent so much time with it this year is so exciting. I think I'm getting ready to like maybe get back to it at some point this next year. We'll see. There's enough stuff that's come out now that I'm like, there's a whole bunch of content I've never experienced before. For the same reason I wouldn't play the game before it was a 1.0. Mm-hmm. I really wanted to experience that full experience, and I think getting to experience that again will be a very fun time. Also, I have a Dark Urge playthrough to finish. So
there you go. Yeah, even like the things I'm doing now, I'm doing the Origin playthroughs where I'm playing through as Karlach, or I'm playing through as Will to see like the different choices, or and because it's fun, because then you can be like, yeah, I am going to be an evil Will, and I'm going to decimate the Grove or something like that. And if you do that with a Tav, Will leaves your party, or Will fights you, or whatever. But like being able to kind of do that as the good characters adds a fun new flavor.
That's
to,
interesting.
to
Okay.
those like interactions and like playing Will and yeah, like letting your will be like, yeah, I am going to rip Karlach's head off and kill Karlach, and so that your will doesn't get horns from Mizora and stuff like that. So there's also a fun one that I did play with where it's like, hey, yeah, here's a polyamory mod, so you can romance everybody.
There you go.
And even if you didn't romance them just naturally, you can like cast a spell in quotes, and suddenly you are now dating that character, and so you will have like the options available for that kind of stuff. So you can basically be romancing everybody. So yeah, I like finally saw the house in romance stuff for the first time. Didn't fuck him as a bear. I had him get out of bear form, but still is like fun to explore those different options and stuff. So
Some will call you a coward for that.
yeah, no, absolutely, that's fair. But yeah, a ton of fun just jumping back and enjoying more Baldur's Gate 3 for all that fun stuff. So what do you got in terms of your next honorable mention?
This is a game that honestly was a hard contention for me. Like, do I break my rule again? And this year I said no. Shadow of the Erd Tree is my final honorable mention.
Yeah.
It is a game that was, like, if I put it on my list, it's a strong contender for number one. This is a game that is a exclamation point on an incredible tour de force, I'm trying to think of the right term here that I want to use. Best that somebody's ever done. I'm trying to think, like pièce de résistance. Like this is the bet, like for them to say, hey, this 10 out of 10 game that was your 2022 game of the year, guess what? 2 years later, we're going to put out an expansion of this game that redefines the way you look at the original game. How are they going to take it on? There are people in New Game Plus 7 who have like maxed out everything. How are they going to do that? A genius way of implanting that into that. Like of being like, hey, you keep your same level. It's just you're going to be super nerfed when you go to this shadow world instead. How do you get unnerfed? By getting more of these things in collectibles. Once again, making it so exploration is tied to, or in this case, being tied to exploring the landscape. Not just one-shotting every boss and running through the game. Really working your way through it the way that the Souls experience really, like From Software's crafted, that is just so perfect. Lore-wise, brilliant stuff revealed in it. Not going to spoil anything here. The last boss, the final boss for this game, I literally, like, you saw me. I fought against that boss for 2 weeks straight. 2 weeks straight, I played against that boss. Hours upon hours, I sunk into it, trying out new builds, trying out new cheeses, figuring out how to beat that boss. And finally beating it is one of, if not the defining, triumphant moment for games this year for me. It's an argument, should that have been in it? I feel that way, but if that's the case, then it's not a 1.0 experience. It's not the biggest, and this is the kicker for me, is the amount of stuff you have to do in the primary game, for the first part of the game, to get to the point where you then can do the DLC, is where that's the ticker for me. Mm-hmm. I can't start a new game and then hop right into the DLC expansion stuff.
Even with all the stuff we did, I couldn't jump immediately into Shadows of the Erd Tree. There were still bosses I needed to kill before that would have been available.
Only one boss, I think, but yeah, still sure. That's still a limitation on it.
Yep.
And so the fact that you gatekeep the expansion behind that, and Endwalker and this is the reason why Endwalker worked, is because you have to play the entire expansion, but it's the main story quest. It's built into it. Your experience and your growth through it. That's the payoff. For
Endwalker, you've had to have played all of the other stuff too. So it's like
this is what I'm saying though, is you're on a guided path that takes you, and it builds up to the point where this is now the conclusion of that. This is, hey, new area, new characters, new story. Not like some stuff is tied to what you did in the main game, but it's not a culmination of this, saga that you've been experiencing for years. It's not in its own right, its own standalone game but at the same time, and like Endwalker wasn't so standalone game, but at the same time, it brought a level of conclusion to an epic story that was told in the course of 10 years. It delivered on that. And it felt almost impossible that it would deliver on that. But since it did, that's why it got into my top 10, and that's why it dominated and was number 1. Over incredible games. Ghost of Tsushima was one of those games. No, it wasn't. Sorry, I'm misremembering, but...
Yeah, different years. I mean, like, it's... I'm very much, I have always been, like, I will say this. We broke the rule when we put Endwalker as, like, our number 1. But yeah, the general rule is like, hey, yeah, this is not a standalone experience. It is not a like game of the year contender because you have to do a whole bunch of other stuff to even access this game. Like you can't just buy Shadow of the Erdtree and then play Shadow of the Erdtree. You have to buy Elden Ring, play a bunch of Elden Ring, and then get into the Shadow of the Erdtree stuff. And Endwalker, I argue, is absolutely in the same thing. You have to buy all of the other things in Final Fantasy XIV before you can get to Endwalker, but Endwalker broke the mold and it broke the thing because it was the end of a 10-year culmination of things and did it so effectively. I will also say, like, for me, Endwalker probably wouldn't have been my top 10 if I had played the rest of Final Fantasy XIV any other year, but the fact that I played all of Final Fantasy XIV there in 2021, that was what like got it up to the top of the list for me. Whereas you, I think, were more like you had been around for the journey over a much more wider span of time. But it's still like Endwalker is our exception to the rule. And yeah, for whatever reason, Shadow of the Erdtree doesn't meet that same like we'll make the exception this time around that we've made in the past. But.
And I brought up the question in my write-up of like, when does an exception stop being an exception? When does it just like... At what point are we, my question for this year going into it and like ending it is, would Shadow of the Erdtree prove that the no DLC, no expansion rule is a floodgate that got broken open by Endwalker? And the determination I made by like, and I went back and forth like earlier this year, I had the opposite stance. Mm-hmm. But really it's in the last month and a half that I've like, that's not going to be my game of the year. It could be if this was like if it was a whole game by itself, Elden Ring plus Shadow of the Erdtree, all coming out this year, that would have broken it for sure.
As maybe another comparison, if this had been like so Final Fantasy VII Remake had the intergrade DLC that was like, okay, you can just play this Yuffie story, apart from everything. You can just like from the main menu, you can just go into that side of things. If Shadow of the Erdtree had been that kind of thing, would that have affected things for you?
Yes, I think that at that point, that probably would have moved me over to, like, even if it's just like, hey, import it from wherever you're at in the campaign, we're kicking up Shadow of the Erdtree. That would have been like, okay, that mechanic there, that means it's its own standalone thing. I can give it that Game of the Year treatment. Mm-hmm. But it comes down to it is like the exception stops being an exception when you make the exception so many times. And I do not want this to be and I'm going to use a term I usually hate, but a slippery slope. Yep. I don't want this to be a sign of, if I really like you enough, I'm gonna make that exception.
And that's for me. That was the early access thing this year. Like, Field of Mystria, easily a top 10 experience for me this year, but I don't want to give it that because then when it actually does come out, I can't grade it on the full thing because I feel weird because I gave it something, back in 2024.
Yeah, and then
same for Hades 2 or something like that.
Same thing.
Yeah, like Hades 2, I know that based on just, what's in there from the stuff that's been released thus far, that probably, easily would have been a top 10 experience too. But I don't want to give Hades 2 a Game of the Year consideration here in 2024 and then not be able to do it again in 2025 or 2026 or have it be like in the same, like, realistically, what I just said with all the Baldur's Gate 3 mods, my number one experience of the year was Baldur's Gate 3 again this year. I don't want to give Baldur's Gate 3 my Game of the Year 2 years in a row, though.
And that's kind of like what my feeling was. Like, if Elden Ring, by itself, hadn't been my Game of the Year that year, that also might have swayed some things. Yep. But to kind of give it its flowers twice, a bit much. And I'm going to be honest, there's a good chance that it would have been Shadows of the Erdtree would have been number 1 this year.
Yeah. All right. So that was your last honorable mention?
Yep.
All right. We've got mine all knocked out too. So here we are. All right. So much for this being a short run because we're, an hour and a half into the episode and we're finally getting into our top 10. But I think one of the things that we didn't touch on kind of at the top. This will be a very interesting top 10 year list, not only because it's just the two of us instead of like, a Frank or a Logan kind of joining us as well, but also because circumstantially, a lot of this year was, okay, a lot of your list is what was available on Game Pass or what can I borrow from Trevor because of the job situation. So I think a lot of we're going to have a lot of similar games in our top 10 just from those circumstances themselves. So a lot of these will probably go a little bit quicker because it'll be like, oh, I have that higher on my list or something like that. But with all of that said, diving into our top 10, just making the timestamp here. My number 10, which I imagine probably going to be higher on your list, is Unicorn Overlord.
It is higher on my list.
Yeah, that was my number 10 game of the year. So we will talk about that a little bit later down the line. What was your number 10, Cam?
Dragon Age: The Veilguard, which I believe is going to be much further.
It's going to be higher on my list. Yep, indeed. So
this is what we're talking about.
Number 10, boom, that timestamp already done. And 30 seconds later, I'm moving on to number 9s. Our, excuse me, my number 9 might be higher on your list. The Legend of Zelda Echoes of Wisdom. Did that one rate for you?
You know what? It did not rate for me. Sorry, it didn't make my top 10.
Yep.
That would have been an honorable mention that I forgot about. So.
Yeah. Legend of Zelda Echoes of Wisdom. I had a lot of fun with this game. I talked about it in kind of my review for it. It was a great return to my favorite era of the Legend of Zelda stuff, namely being my favorite of the series being Link to the Past, very much being like in that pseudo Link to the Past kind of world. If you actually if you look at the map kind of overlaid across one another, it very much seems like it is the Link to the Past map, but this one, because there's more space on the systems now, kind of goes and expands out beyond that. But it was a ton of fun jumping into the recent Link's Awakening, like the chibi art style, kind of keeping that feel going with this. And then just the mechanic of Zelda being the protagonist in this one was a ton of fun. The fact that like the game starts at the end of a Link's adventure, but like he gets, thwarted, and so it becomes the beginning of a Zelda adventure is a lot of fun here. I liked the Echoes mechanic for the puzzles of the game. Didn't like it for the combat. The weakest thing, much like Indiana Jones for me, ends up being the combat in this game because as I touched on back when we did the reviews of it, it makes Zelda feel like a bystander in her own game when your combat is, okay, I'm using echoes to bring enemies into the world to fight my battles for me. I would have much rather this been like a Zelda as Sheik kind of experience where, yeah, you can use those echoes to like, help with that, but still giving Zelda enough agency with her own weapons and stuff like that, as opposed to what the game does of like, okay, you can tap into this like limited ability where you basically just become Link for a little bit with swords and bombs and stuff like that. I didn't like that. I would have liked Zelda to be able to fight her own battles. But I all that said, I still liked the puzzle mechanics of it. I wish there weren't so many wisdom or echoes because like, especially they give you the bed as like one of the first ones, and that lets you build a staircase, so you can pretty much use that for most of the puzzles throughout the game. So like by the end of the game, also it sucks in the Breath of the Wild Tears of the Kingdom thing, like the UI for like selecting which echo you want to use, all being in one line, nightmare. At least they give you the option to like sort by, most recently used or most used. Easily most used for me throughout the entire game was the bed. Nothing ever came close to that.
Bed was goated. It was the way to break all the puzzles.
But still a ton of fun. And I liked just how that added this interesting new mechanic to this world and exploring. Legend of Zelda is a lot of fun for me. So ends up being my number 9 of the year, especially in a year where Nintendo gave us 2 of their like princess-led things because Princess Peach Showtime came out earlier in the year. Huge disappointment. That was like, that's the game that like, it would be the most dishonorable mention because I didn't even bother to play it enough to rate it in my game of the year. So it's not even in my top 20. It falls outside of that because I played it, put like, a couple hours into it, and it was just such bad and boring gameplay that like I compared it to Balan Wonderworld from a couple years ago that like is notoriously just one of the worst like experiences period. And I only played the demo of Balan Wonderworld, but it was like that, but with like a Mario coat of paint on it, where it was like so disappointing. Probably a much better experience if it is like your first game, but so disappointing for what it felt like it could have been. Mm-hmm. And I thought here, Legend of Zelda: Echoes of Wisdom did Princess Zelda a much better service in that regard. So my number game.
This does fall. I should have. I forgot to put it on my write-up list, but it is on my. So I went back to my pre-game of the year list document. Mm-hmm. It is on that. I just did not transfer it over when I was doing the write-ups for my honorable mentions. Would be an honorable mention for me. It falls outside of the top 10 of this year.
Sure.
I think that it is a really good game. It's really good, great at points. But the stuff you've already mentioned are the downfalls for this game, to the point where, despite the fact that it's a really fun experience while you're playing it, afterwards there's not really much that I want to write home about it.
Yeah, it also is very much it outwears its welcome a little bit. Like it is too long of an experience for what it is in terms of like it's not like once you in the same way that like okay you've unlocked all the abilities at the beginning of the game of Breath of the Wild or Tears of the Kingdom, you're not real like if the game isn't giving you new challenges to make you think of new ways to use those abilities, it's kind of like this isn't fun. There's no fun in exploring here. And maybe because of how broken and OP the bed was, a lot of the Echoes of Wisdom felt like that, where it's like, okay, I'm doing the same thing over and over again, or I'm using the same warrior echoes over and over again to get through all these fights. I'm not having to change up strategy, or I'm not having to change my tact to meet the needs of a new puzzle or anything like that. I think that's where the game's, and then but then you get to the end game where light spoilers, you and Link are paired up in dungeons, and you have to do a thing that will help Link, and Link then does a thing to help you, kind of thing. Like there were a lot of interesting mechanics that get introduced that late in the game that I felt like, oh, if that had been pulled back, 10 hours and we built on that more, I think there could have been a lot of fun. But it's just like, nope, that was just here end game stuff, and you spend 90% of the game doing the same thing. That just makes it feel a little bit like, well, this wasn't as fun of an experience for the overall length of the game as it could have been.
All of that you just said, but also on top of that, what you mentioned earlier about like Zelda having a Link mode, didn't care for that. I would have preferred a Sheik mode or something like that. That would have been much more of a in line with Zelda. I was really hoping that this would give us Zelda a bit more that bar's a mana bar for offensive spells that Zelda can use. I would have much preferred something like that. I think it, like you mentioned earlier, doesn't work in what it's trying to do for like what the game is trying to do. Overall though, it is like it's an almost forgettable, but it just doesn't stay with you. Mm-hmm. It doesn't have a lasting impact that a Zelda title, especially the first Zelda you play as Zelda, it doesn't have a lasting impact the way that I think it should have. It falls short of being a game that like I still think about moments of Tears of the Kingdom a year later. Mm-hmm. There's still stuff that like I carry with me that I experienced in that game.
Sure.
Like this is not a Breath of the Wild like that modern like those like major game experiences. This is a Link's Awakening type experience.
Yeah, I did appreciate in that vein. I appreciated the return to classic dungeons.
Yes,
that Breath of the Wild and Tears of the Kingdom don't have. So I liked that element of this of, okay, I'm going into a dungeon. I'm going to have to find the path and find the keys to unlock everything, all that stuff. I appreciated that return to kind of that classic thing that you occasionally get a very light version of that in like shrines in the modern Zeldas. But I thought it was like a decent hybrid of the two kind of styles, but still has a lot of growth, I think, to what would have been a higher game on the list. Absolutely.
Yeah. I just hope it sells well enough that they put out another Zelda game.
Sure.
That's my big hope for it.
Yep. So what's your number 9?
My number 9 is Helldivers 2.
Helldivers 2. All right. Tell me about it. Yeah, because I did not play that one this year, so it is not on my list.
There is a version of Helldivers 2 that if it had come out, if it hadn't had the, like, this is almost a, what was the game? It was I played the sequel. We both played the sequel of it, but it's the zombie game that,
Dying Light.
Dying Light. It has that Dying Light moment of nothing.
Friday Night Dying Light.
Friday Night Dying Light. There you go. Thank you. It has that moment of capturing the zeitgeist in just the right moment with nothing else around it that allows it to suck up all the oxygen in the room and become a game that kind of transcends what it otherwise would be. And what the game actually is a really, really, really tight third-person shooter that is based around gun mechanics, special weapon mechanics, and like just overall like fun gunplay combat. Tie that into a multiplayer experience that is borders on seamless at moments. Like when somebody drops into your game, they literally drop into the game. Their drop pod, the Helldiver drop pod comes down. Their warship is in orbit with yours. Like, it very much is about like merging game worlds, but done in such a seamless and in-universe way that's really brilliantly done. But where it really succeeds and where it really takes itself to the next level, where I think it succeeds where Helldivers 1 failed, is in the meta-narrative. The narrative of, you're a Helldiver, you're fighting the enemies of humanity. The meta-narrative now is about, and the meta-narrative above that is, this is a fully propagandized world that you're playing in. Everything is propagandized. Super Earth, super democracy, all like super democracy. You don't vote in super democracy. The AI the AI automatons are socialists. Like it's full on propaganda, straight out of Starship Troopers. Yeah. I love that aspect of it. On top of that, the way that Arrowhead Game Studio has found itself like a an undying, loyal fan base of people who are into the meta narrative and engage with it on things like social media, on Reddit. There's ways that the Arrowhead Game Studio has captured a spirit of a game that otherwise wouldn't work in a world without social media or without like forums or Reddit or something. The fact that the narrative continues outside of the game itself. In my write-up, I specify and talk about how I am a veteran of the first and second battles of Mavalon Creek. That means nothing to you, Trevor.
No.
That means nothing to you. But to people who played Helldivers 2 at the beginning of this year, in late March, early April.
You liberated that place.
I was not part of the liberation effort.
Oh, okay.
That's the third battle of Malavon Creek. The third battle is where we successfully liberated it. I was at work. They liberated it before I could get home. It's just one of those things. Like, It's a real life game, like a real time game. The way they have it built up with the galaxy map, where the narrative that they're able to tell inside the game plays into the people's reactions outside the game. There is an entire, like, and you want to think, oh, Mavalon Creek, the guys, I bet the people who stayed behind, who stayed at Mavalon Creek, who never left that system, never left it, meant that they could continue playing on that level, on that planet the entire time. You think, oh man, those guys must be heroes. Some people hate them. Some people vilify them. Because we were trying to liberate other areas. Why weren't you guys coming to help? Directive came to abandon Malavon Creek. But there are Creekers out there who never abandoned it, who stayed behind, who fought the good fight. And I respect those, and I salute those soldiers. Those Helldivers have a place in my heart. Because I fought beside those brothers and sisters and non-binary siblings at the first and second battles of Mavalon Creek. Now, did I pull out when the creek fell after the first one? Yeah, I did. But I came back for the second battle. And even though we didn't win, I was ready to come back for the third, where we did win. Now you go to Mavalon Creek, no automatons. But I remember in the second battle, where they took the heads off of fallen Helldivers and staked them and put them out in front of their bases. I remember.
The last 5 minutes has been me just thinking Warner Brothers wishes they had this kind of devotion to Suicide Squad.
Oh my gosh,
Justice
yeah.
League last year.
Oh yeah, hands down, yeah.
Yeah. Helldivers 2 definitely had a fun like meta narrative thing going on. As an outsider, like it was fun to see that and fun to watch people get so ingrained and like, okay, this is where we're going. This is where the mission is. This is where we're doing all this stuff now. But yeah, I was like, oh, that's just two multiplayer co-op.
Yep.
This not going to be my cup of tea.
And here's the thing: if you're trying to play solo, people will just join you randomly.
Sure. Yeah.
They drop in. I have to say I love the humor that they found in this game. It's brilliant. And I'm going to end my thoughts on Helldiver 2 by a quote from the community. There are countless hells in the galaxy, but there is only one. Sorry, I keep on mispronouncing the name. It's Malevelon Creek. There's only one of those.
All right. Moving on to number 8. I'm pretty sure this one not on your list. My number 8, The Plucky Squire.
Not on my list. I didn't play it.
Yeah. So this was a charming little 2D cross 3D platformer puzzler kind of experience this year that won me over in its original trailers because you are a 2D storybook character, literally in a storybook that basically pops out of the world of the storybook onto the desk in which this storybook lies, and you basically like bounce back and forth between the 2D and the 3D. It plays with like, if you played the Baba Is You game from a few years back, it plays with that kind of mechanic here and there where like, okay, here's the words in the storybook of like, the gate is locked. And you have to go find somewhere, another page of the book where open was the word, on the open fields. And you basically take open from that other page and you bring it on and you swap in locked to open, and suddenly the gate now is open. And that's how you're solving some of the puzzles in this world. It's how you can kind of like change the enemies of the world. Other than that, it's like a little minor hack and slash kind of thing. Just a fun little, 2D / 3D hack and slash adventure kind of thing. The game occasionally plays with it takes two elements of like, hey, sometimes, for this little sequence, you're going to do like a little bullet hell kind of, sequence of a game. Or, this is going to be a little punch out kind of sequence where you're going to be fighting a honey badger that is going to, square up with you in like first person mode. And you got to, hit it. There's like a little rhythm section game where one of your allies, Thrash, wants to be like a heavy metal drummer, and so he has like a little drumming rhythm sequence kind of game thing. Just lots of little fun charm to this game. It's probably easier than a lot of people that ended up being the audience for it probably were expecting. Like the target audience for this probably like 10 and under kind of thing, and it's probably right up their alley in terms of like difficulty for that. But it was a ton of fun. I had a great time with this game. Lots of charm to it, and it's very much like if they do a follow-up game for the Plucky Squire, I will absolutely be there and join in. My biggest gripes with it ended up being that like collectibles were a little borked and broken, and so I ended up having to like replay the whole game just to get like a platinum because the collectibles in my count originally got screwed up, and I did encounter like a game-breaking bug where basically I got soft locked in the game. Like one of the objects I needed just kind of like disappeared off the book and I couldn't get it, and like I was like, well, what do I do? And the only way I was able to progress was by like loading a save from like 30 minutes earlier or something like that, and then just going in and not doing that again. So some minor hiccups there. I'm sure that's probably been patched out in the time since. But yeah, like just this one in a game where in a year where there were a lot of games that had this kind of thing where I was like, oh, like I'm really interested in Neva, or I'm really interested in Tales of Kenzera's Out, and they ended up being disappointing to me in the long run of like, oh, they didn't click the way I hoped they were going to click. This one clicked in the way that like I was expecting it to click, and I had a ton of fun with it and had a fun little like meta narrative to it. The main little town in the storybook world is like Artia or something like that. And like every little citizen is a reference to something from art history. You've got like Van Gogh there, painting kind of in his art style. You've got like a Picasso kind of, blue period-esque, bit, or I think it's Magritte, who is the guy with like the green apple in front of the face, with the guy in the top hat kind of thing. Like that's a whole little puzzle in the game. And so, yeah, just a ton of fun little like art Easter eggy things that just were right up my alley in terms of like, okay, the people that made this game hit on just the right wavelength of my humor and style. So a lot of fun with Plucky Squire. Great time with it. And definitely recommend for anybody that I believe it was a PlayStation Plus like premium kind of thing. So if you have that, you probably have access to the game. So and like overall the game's 6 to 8 hours, probably something like that. I'm always going to be a fan of those kind of like, hey, I can play this experience in a weekend and have a great time with it, as opposed to as much as I enjoy sometimes the like 100-hour experiences, sometimes I just don't have the the wherewithal for that.
Yeah.
And in a year like this one that had so many of those, these little nuggets of like, I can just jump in and play this over the course of a couple nights was a much needed breath of fresh air. So Plucky Squire, my number 8 game of 2024. How about you, Cam? What's your number 8?
My number 8 is going to be Gundam Breaker 4.
Gundam Breaker 4? All
yep.
Right. I didn't touch that one at all, so tell me about it.
Yeah, sure. So Gundam Breaker 4 is a game I picked up. It's a game that came out earlier in the year, or earlier in the year that I played it last year. Anyway, we're in 2025 now, so it's sometimes weird to like think that, oh yeah, I mean, we're only 5 days in, but still. To that point though, Gundam Breaker 4 is a return to I'm trying to think of how to explain this in a really good, coherent way. Gundam Breaker 4 is a game where you are playing a video game about building Gundam models and then having combat experiences against other players. It's not a game where you're doing that. It's a game where you're playing that game.
Yeah.
So there's a bit of a layered meta narrative to it. That being said, it's not that important to the overarching story. That you're playing a game. I mean, I shouldn't say it's not important to the overarching story. It's critical to the overarching story. But the meta narrative on that aspect of it, like, it's you play, like, that aspect of it.
If you die in the Gundam, you didn't die in real life.
Exactly. Yeah. There's not that aspect of it. That being said, it's my first Gundam Breaker main series game. These games came out in the past, never tried them, but other Gundam fans have been very hot on them. When Gundam Breaker NT came out, I was like, oh, cool, this is on sale. I went and bought it. Was told later found out people don't recommend playing that game. There's a lot of aspects about that game that are just not good, just aren't fun. A lot of decisions made for that game combat wise just don't work as well. And so they kind of like return to format with Gundam Breaker 4. It's really, really good. It's really, really good overall. Whether it's the kind of Gundams and mobile suits you can build and customize out to, color scheme wise, weapon types, everything about it is top to bottom like my dream mecha game in a lot of ways, like for Gundam specifically. Building out a very custom Gundam that is just mine. Nobody else, you can make it yourself, but I made it and it's mine. And it's parts from certain Gundams that I enjoy the weapon types and abilities that come from them. Overall, it's one of my favorite games this year. I can't really go too much into it. The thing I'll say is the person you play in the game is meeting new players in the game. It's an early access type game, and so there's a lot of talks about quote unquote bugs that aren't really bugs, because it turns out later that the game is being powered by AI. Hold for booze.
Some old .hack vibes to it.
A little bit, yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
A little bit. I shouldn't say a little bit. A lot of .hack vibes, which is why the story vibes with me so hard.
Yeah.
Overall, it's just a really great, fun experience. Whether it's the gameplay, the story, a little simple for my taste, but considering the fact that this is the first Gundam Breaker game that I've played that isn't about a high schooler joining the Gundam club to then like take it to competitions. That's a new thing. Maybe I would have preferred the typical story, but it's fine. Also, there's cameos from every other Gundam Breaker game. For people who care. I care because Gundam Breaker mobile characters show up, and I flipped out when that happened. I didn't know that was going to happen. So when they showed up, I freaked out. I was like, let's go. Gundam Breaker mobile, no longer available. You can no longer play it. They shut it down, to my great disappointment. It's one of my favorite games that I've ever played, much less one of my favorite games I've ever played on mobile device. And the fact that it's lost to me now is like why lost media is such an important topic we need to keep discussing. And because there's untold amounts of mobile games that are lost to time now.
Sure. Yeah.
So,
all right. Gundam Breaker 4, Cameron's number 8 game of the year. As we move on to number 7s, and my number 7 game of the year was Prince of Persia: The Lost Crown. This is one I played.
I didn't play it, so it's all yours.
Yeah. Back at the beginning of the year, hot off of like a Dragon Infinite Wealth or Final Fantasy VII Rebirth. After spending hundreds of hours in those two games, I was looking for a smaller experience. And Prince of Persia: Lost Crown had some pretty good reviews. So I was like, yeah, all right, I'll pick it up. And played through it. And yeah, it was a great, fun Metroidvania, which oftentimes is a very hit or miss genre for me. Like, I love the Guacamelees, but a lot of other Metroidvanias don't always do it for me. It's like, and part of it ends up being like so much backtracking by design isn't always as fun as I would like it to be. But for this one, it is they did a great job of making the world feel big, but also have enough like fast travel points that I didn't feel like, okay, now I've unlocked this ability and I know I need to go back to here. Okay, I can get back there pretty quickly. I don't need to like manually travel all the way, back 70 screens or whatever. This was very much, you touched on kind of with like The Legend of Zelda. This is very much a story that like in the moment I was enjoying it. Couldn't tell you a beat about it really here after the fact. I probably remember some like big, story moments or whatever, but like even like the main character, I'm like, that's all out of my brain. Like this was very much like I enjoyed the gameplay of this game. Story was whatever. I wasn't really like looking to. I don't have like a great lineage of Prince of Persia. I've really probably only played Sands of Time, being the only other Prince of Persia game that I ever really checked out, and even that one couldn't tell you most of what that one's about. I just remember the mechanics being fun of like, okay, yeah, you rewind time a little bit and okay, now you can try again kind of stuff.
If the movie was based off that game story, I do know the story of Prince Persia.
Prince Persia Sands of Time. But yeah, this was very much a great fun time in the moment. I appreciate that they had like accessibility things so I could be like, all right, I don't want to have to deal with like the, parry mechanics of some of these boss fights. I can just kind of brute force my way through them a little bit more and just kind of enjoy that. The puzzles were fun. The platforming puzzles, especially in some of the challenges, were a lot of fun to like, have that moment of like, okay, I did it. I did everything I needed to do in the, I switched the things when I needed to switch them and had a great time with that. So, fan of the accessibility things, and it ended up being, I believe, the winner of the accessibility award this year. So shout out to that. Sad that the game didn't perform as well because, much like a lot of the things Ubisoft did this year, kind of got set out to die and didn't really get a big push behind it. But I had a great time with it. Sad that the studio behind it probably not going to make a follow up. And admittedly, I didn't like feel a desire to go back in and check out like the DLC when that came out. It was a fun Metroidvania action kind of moment to moment gameplay. Was a good time. Building up cool combos with against enemies was a lot of fun, and had a good time with Prince of Persia: The Lost Crown. So it ends up being my number 7 game of the year.
Nice.
What do you got, number 7, Cam?
Number 7, I have Unicorn Overlord.
Unicorn Overlord. All right. Then, we already talked about that was my number 10. So I will hand over the floor to you for Unicorn Overlord.
Sure. I'm a big Fire Emblem fan. I love the Fire Emblem games. I have to the point where before it was translated into English, I went back and played the NES versions of, like emulated versions of Fire Emblem 1 and 2. When they re-released on DS, I was super excited, and was super disappointed that the Fire Emblem, I forgot the subtitle for it, but it's the sequel to the Shadow Dragon one, which is the first game. It's a sequel to that game, and that game in it of itself is still locked in Japan, but you can like find a unofficial translated version of it. I've played through that game as well. Like, to say I love Fire Emblem, like I've played through Three Houses multiple times. I've played through to the point where I almost got into the Musou Three Hopes. Didn't make it, like, just didn't work out. I think it was last year it came out. Just didn't work out budget wise to be a game that I could get. I look forward to playing it in the future though. I just love the Fire Emblem like approach to characters and gameplay, and it's one of the only like strategy games that I enjoy. Unicorn Overlord joins that by essentially almost like ripping off the first game's story. Blue-haired prince, like, sent into exile as a child, grows up on an island. I remember when I was like, oh, this sounds like, and I explained like the story of Marth's beginning of his journey. You're like, that's the same game. Yeah. It works. It's a great hero's journey story. But what they don't tell you is there are so many characters in this game that are so easy to love. Unicorn Overlord is from Vanillaware. It is one of their best games that they've ever made, and that's saying something for somebody who 13 Sentinels upended a year's list of mine. It came in at number 2 that year. This did not come in as high. I think there's a lot of things and lessons for them to learn for if they ever make a sequel or do something similar to this. But the fact that there are so many characters and so many different designs, there's so many different variations of them. Instead of just having the early Fire Emblem games are notable for having multiple characters with borderline the same designs. They so go outside of that by bringing in characters with different body types from all different sizes. Anything you can imagine as far as like the kind of like profile a person could be built with in the game is in this game. And not that aspect of it, but especially with the female characters, they look for a scale of beauty to all of them. Vanillaware, famous for exaggerated features on women. That is still here, but it's done across the spectrum, and it's done in a really great way. There's like an 8-foot tall woman in this game. You have to go through tremendous amounts of effort to like
you gotta beat the Coliseum to get her. And,
yeah,
worth it.
Totally worth it. She's an awesome character. Yeah. All the characters have such a great, unique story to them that makes it fun to engage with them and fun to build your bonds up with them enough to get to know them better. I think it fails in having way too many characters.
Yep.
I get why you didn't want to leave some of them on the cutting room floor. They're really great, but there are too many characters in this game. That's its biggest flaw. I know on hardcore runs, it's designed that way. So on hardcore runs, where a character dies, they die actually, so that you have characters to replace them with. But it hurts the game overall, and it hurts the balance of the kinds of pawns you want to make and teams you want to build. It makes it just way more complicated than it needs to be, and it just does such a great job though of telling a globe-trotting story about rebellion and trying to liberate the world from an evil dictator. It delivers that in spades. It does such a great job of it, of like the mystery behind the voices and the magic of the world is very cool. I appreciated that they really make you say, hey, you need to find somebody and basically marry them if you want to access the full power of your rings. Setting that up, and you can give the ring to a dude. It just matters is that you have a great bond with them. And like some of the guy relationships are like, some come off more romanceable than others, but overall it really does a great job of like really letting you explore a relationship with this character and the relationship these characters have with other people. We talked about it earlier in Tales of Mystria.
Fields of Mystria.
Fields of Mystria. people have lives outside of you. Things happen outside of you. Getting to see that happen is a staple of the Fire Emblem games, but it definitely comes up again here. It feels great overall. I can't speak high enough of it. It's just too many characters, and by the time the end of the game comes around, I feel like combat plateaus.
Mm-hmm.
I know that there's higher difficulties and everything, but the lack of new things being introduced that made things more interesting helps it suffer a little bit towards the end game, but otherwise I think it's stellar.
Yeah. I got the platinum in this, so I did pretty much everything this game has to offer. And I picked it up because your brother-in-law John basically had like mentioned that like his kids had been playing like the demo or something like that, and I was like, all right, let me see. And I knew your love of 13 Sentinels from earlier in the year, so yeah, or a couple years ago. I was like, all right, let me give it a shot. In that time where I was like, I'm looking for something to play, let me check it out. Wasn't expecting like what it was in terms of gameplay stuff of like, hey, yeah, you go into battle and you're moving your forces around the battlefield, but once they get into combat, they're pretty much on autopilot based on like whatever their makeup is. So that took some getting used to for me. And yeah, this very much like Prince of Persia, like Legend of Zelda, Echoes of Wisdom is the epitome. Like when you played it a few months after I had played it, you're talking through stuff and I'm like, I've already forgotten all of this game. It was very much like loved it in the moment. And then, it fluttered away, it fluttered out. And I think part of it is because, there are so many characters. So I never really felt attached to any of them specifically. Like there are a few that I'm like, oh, I like their archetype and I like their tropes and stuff like that. But like couldn't tell you names, couldn't tell you like the, inner dynamics and all that stuff. Because there are so many. And, which is like that Three Houses, like Three Houses being my 2019 game of the year, Fire Emblem Three Houses. Like I loved that, and I loved getting to know all those characters and building up the relationships and getting every like the 3-star scenes and all that stuff. And this, it was very much like, okay, there are a few characters that are clearly your core characters. They're the ones, the non-missable ones. Those are the ones they actually like care about a little bit and gave a little bit more meat to on the bone to. And then there are the 70 that you can collect throughout the rest of the game in like side quests and throughout the main quest stuff. And it's pretty much like every one of them is like, okay, you get the option to let them join you or not. And I think there was only one that I didn't actually have join me, and it was just because I didn't realize that like I was making that choice in the moment.
Oh, gotcha.
Like I didn't realize I was giving them the redemption moment option. But other than that, like I recruited everybody, and so I had far too many people for my even with every one of my 10 squads capped out at 5 people, I still had plenty of people that were sitting on the bench and did not ever really see combat because there was never a need to level them up and then also because there are so many people trying to keep everybody at a good level so that like if I need that type of resource in a combat encounter, I'm not going to be completely screwed because they're way under leveled or something like that. Made that kind of balance a lot of like really tough for a lot of it. And I didn't feel like there was enough in the way of like, okay, here's where you can just do grinding stuff.
That's a big problem is finding places to grind out levels and get more levels. There's only
there's like
certain
3
places.
or 4 little like, and they're related to like a side questy thing where like, okay, you can do that combat encounter thing over and over again if you want, but even there, you're not getting a ton of experience. So it's really just good for like very base level, getting somebody up to a little bit of snuff.
Yeah, it's really there more so for, I feel like, appreciate like relationships.
Yeah.
Oh, I want to build up their rapport so that they get higher. Okay, I'm going to take them into this and like build it up that way.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Same with like I liked the mechanic of like, okay, you can restore the towns and you can like leave somebody garrison there and you'll collect
that aspect
like
of
resources
it. Yep.
there. And with the big towns, you can build up an inn and you can have some of your crew sit down at the inn and have a meal together. And,
shared meals were awesome.
And that's easily the thing that will boost up your relationship with people the most. But a lot of it, like the 1-star, 2-star, 3-heart scenes of those ended up oftentimes just kind of feeling like, well, this is a little bit lackluster.
Yep.
This didn't do a ton for me. This wasn't as engaging as a Fire Emblem Three Houses kind of sequence might have been, or something like that. So I think there was so much poured in there that it ends up being very shallow instead of like a cut down cast of characters that you could go deeper with a lot of different people. It was very much like good experience, had a lot of fun with it, but and just cracks my top 10 there at number 10. But I couldn't tell you most of what that game has in it in terms of like characters and story, and it was like the big overarching like, okay, yeah, you're a prince and you're building up a rebellion to try and save the people. Like I appreciate that the prince is always like, I want to help everybody. I'm not like, especially as you get into areas where like there is like, okay, this is very clearly like racial tension allegories and stuff like that.
There's the fact that you're liberating an empire that your kingdom used to be at war with constantly.
Yeah.
And what does that mean to... Also, another thing that's interesting is like your cousin, who is introduced in that area, has been in exile, hiding out, trying to avoid getting taken by the big bad, and was basically has basically been a hostage, and thought themselves to be the only hope for your kingdom. And so you coming back has like really derailed what they thought their sense of purpose was. Mm-hmm. Like there's interesting moments like that, but those are just really few and far in between.
Yeah. Any final thoughts on Unicorn Overlord before we move on?
Really good game. You should play it.
Alrighty.
Keep buying Vanillaware games so they keep making more games. That's my feeling about it.
There we go. Okay, moving on to our number 6. My number 6, which we'll talk about here, Dragon Age the Veilguard. You mentioned that was your number 10.
Number 10. Yep.
And there we are here on both of our lists. After revisiting Dragon Age Inquisition earlier in the year in the lead up to Veilguard, I was excited for Veilguard, especially, obviously like Anthem bombed terribly for them. Mass Effect Andromeda didn't do what BioWare probably wanted it to do, or what EA wanted to do, and so like this being like the first new real thing in quite some time, especially for how long people have wanted new stuff from the Dragon Age series or from a Mass Effect thing. It's very much like, okay, like Mass Effect is certainly my series of the two,
sure,
but I also loved all of my time with the other Dragon Age games, and was very excited to kind of get new Dragon Age stuff.
Yeah.
When they were like, hey, we're clearly going in a more action focused route, I was like, cool. I never had that problem with like Dragon Age 2. Like I enjoyed that just fine. I'm not like it needs to be the purest of tactical stuff that Origins or Inquisition had. So I enjoyed that. Like all I really wanted was give me a cast of fun characters to spend some time with and go on an adventure with, and I thought the game did that wonderfully. Shout out in particular to Erika Ishii, who was the voice of my Rook for the game. Had a great time with that, getting to hear their voice just because I love them so much from the Dimension 20 space or Critical Role or Worlds Beyond Number, and can't wait to hear them again in Ghost of Yotai when that comes out. It was fun. Running around with a new crew here, playing with Nev Gallus or Lucanus and Necromancer Vincent Price guy and Emmerich, yeah. Loved the cast of characters that you get in here, and kind of the adventure that you get, and they do a good job of. Yeah, we're in a different part of Thetis for this one, so it's not tied. Much like every game in the series has been like, hey, we're telling a completely different story. This isn't your Shepard moving through the same adventure or anything like that. It continues that trend of, hey, this is a new crew of people. We touched on in I think my review that like I would love to see this become a new version of that. I'd have to do some things story wise because some of the endings might not make that as feasible. But I would love if Rook were kind of like the central character for a new adventure series here in the Dragon Age universe. But yeah, I had a great time with this. It was a lot of fun just going through and enjoying being back in the Dragon Age world and kind of getting to play with the different, power dynamics, everything. I really liked that this did draw on a lot of the like Mass Effect 2-ness of things, of like you're building a team together and, this is, a mission to save the world. Maybe Suicide Squad-y kind of vibes, but maybe not. But like some of the choices, your decision matters, and there is going to be stakes to some of these choices. Not as many as I would have liked in terms of like I think of these games often in like, big 3-act structure where like you would have like a big first act choice that's going to matter, and then a big second act choice and a big third act choice. And I felt like the second act choice didn't really have as much of an impact on the story as maybe the big first act choice of this one.
The first act choice takes such a massive swing and nails it.
Yeah.
That the second act choice is just like, okay.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So that's like my minor grievances of this game are that like, it left some stuff, wanting. And then for a series that has historically been like, okay, yeah, your choices matter in the world that has been built. The fact that so few choices of this one are even able to carry over, or like you basically set up like 4 to 5 choices from your Dragon Age Inquisition thing, and then everything else is just, well, that's here's the world they're giving you. You don't know, how your choices from Inquisition or Dragon Age 2 or Dragon Age Origins really like affected things. Things are bad down south, and that's really all you know.
Here's the thing: things they do narratively in this game to basically be like, hey, guess what? Your decisions, they used to matter.
Yeah.
But what's happened now in Southern Thetis, nothing really you had any impact on really matters anymore.
Yeah.
Things are very different down south.
So yeah, that ultimately like a fun enough time, and there were moments where I considered like this as a top 5 game of the year, but ultimately it just misses out on that as my number 6. And like there will inevitably now moving forward be Baldur's Gate 3 has surpassed like the BioWare magic of a party and companions and all that stuff, that like I went in knowing I wasn't going to get a Baldur's Gate 3 here, but I wanted a BioWare, and it does a decent job in hitting some of the BioWare stuff. I did feel like some of the characters I just had zero interest in like flirting with or being romantic with or any of that kind of stuff. But I did appreciate that like other characters, like I appreciated that, hey, I romanced one character and that meant other characters in my party were free to romance each other.
Yep.
I thought that was a fun little like vibe of the party of like, hey, yeah, we're all going through this very intense thing together, and tensions are high for everybody, and I appreciated that like that led to some other people pairing up, and that was a neat little flavor to the experience and to the vibes of the game.
It's been very cool to see. Certain characters introduced here in Velgard, and think, what would characters from prior games say about that character? What would Anders being possessed by Justice in Dragon Age 2 feel about Lucanus being possessed by Wrath? Like, I know it's not Wrath technically.
Yes, Spite. Maybe. Spite. Yeah.
By being possessed by Spite. Like, what two very different things to be possessed by, but two very different turnouts. Like it brings up a lot of like really fun ideas, and that's the fandom has taken off on that. And so it's been great to see that the characters of the party have been so well received for the most part, that they like that question has been asked and posed for them. Yeah.
Anything you want to add to the Dragon Age conversation, since it was your number 10?
Yeah, sure. If you're wondering why it's my number 10 and not higher on my list, I want to remind everybody I was not planning on playing this game.
Yep.
I have been... This is a game that comes out at a point where the BioWare magic, or the people behind the BioWare magic, don't really have anything to do with the studio, and instead it's their successors.
Well, the term BioWare magic has also been tainted because as the Jason Schreier book, basically like BioWare magic just equals crunch.
Yep.
Just means BioWare crunch.
BioWare crunch, yeah.
But But
to
yeah,
that point,
also the creative minds behind the Mass Effect trilogy and the original Dragon Age games are long gone.
Long
and
gone.
It's a brand new team. It's in the same way that the creative people that worked on New Vegas, it's they're probably not still at Obsidian. Some of them might be, but a lot of people have moved on to other studios and other projects.
That's just how it is in game development. But I think a lot of times we tie the success of a game franchise onto the studio itself. And so when I rolled credits on Dragon Age Inquisition, I have a lot of serious issues with, a lot of serious flaws. And during playing the game, I was like, well, why isn't this BioWare game hitting me the way that other BioWare games do? Despite I'm an apologist for Dragon Age 2 now. But back then, when it first came out, I was like, it felt like a weak follow-up, da-da-da. There's reasons for that I could go into here that I'm not going to. But I'm an apologist now in hindsight, looking back on it. Dragon Age 2 delivered a lot. Dragon Age Inquisition, I was like, what's going on with this? Why is this not hitting me as well? And then in the credits, I'm like, I don't think I recognize a single name here. The big creative juices and forces behind the first two Dragon Age games, David Gator still worked on Dragon Age Inquisition, but that was his last thing that he did with it. And overall, I follow him on Blue Sky now. He's done a really great delve into Dragon Age facts about development of it. Dragon Age has always been a how to put this? It's always been a.
It seems like it's always been it barely got made kind of miracle game.
Pretty much. And the fact that it's been made at all, Dragon Age game is like any video game, but more so that it's sometimes a miracle that it exists.
Yeah.
Dragon Age being a leap into their own custom IP instead of licensing from Dungeons and Dragons for Neverwinter Nights. That being a big swing that they took. Dragon Age 2, where they're like, oh hey, you don't have nearly enough development time to make a proper Dragon Age game. So they made Dragon Age 2. Dragon Age Inquisition, how do we meld the style of 1 and 2 together? How do we make this flow well? And how do we tell a story that pays off people's choices that they made over the first two games? So that those first two games did matter to this universe that we've built. It does a serviceable job of answering those and doing those. And in doing so also opens up a lot of new things, a lot of new questions. So coming into Veilguard, immediately you have 4 choices that you carry over. Awful. Terrible. I've been through my keep recently. I know how many choices got made. I know that you still have the keep live. You know that info still exists for people. Didn't happen. Okay. That's fine. I have questions and I'm not questions, but things I struggle with narratively wise with the game in certain aspects of the Solus and other stuff like that falls flatter for me than I think it does for you. But really what you got me to play this game, by the way, everybody, is Trevor said, if you love the lore of Dragon Age, you're going to love this. You're going to love the lore here. And boy, howdy do I. Sorry, pause for a moment to take a swig.
Yeah. Yeah. The lore, as much as I didn't bother digging into all the codex stuff, I was I know that there's a lot of codex stuff here that Cameron would absolutely love. And even the non-codex stuff, okay, here's what this means for this part of the world. Cameron's going to have some thoughts on this stuff.
I have been part of a larger community theorizing certain things, whether it's the origin of the Blight, whether it's the nature of the Fade and Thedas and how they intertwine together. There's so many questions they get answered in this game. And they do a great job of being hey, this might be the last Dragon Age game we ever make. Here are the answers to the questions you've always been asking. And setting up stuff for some new things, new questions get posed. New things get set up on it. And that's its thing. It does that. Like you said, you want this to be a future follow-up. I hope that they get other success as well. Travis Weeks is somebody who's he's the head writer for Dragon Age, the Veilguard. They and their team, apologies. They and their team had a monumental, gargantuan task of taking the incomplete Dreadwolf design that they had done before they shelved it. And taking that back up and moving it forward into a game that could release on a set deadline. And they accomplished it. They and their team successfully put out a game that I think captures a lot of the spirit of what it means for it to be a BioWare game. The characters, and this is where the problems for me really come into it, is This game has extremely high peaks, lore, character-wise, like really high peaks, and then it has some really low valleys. Not a lot of the dialogue scenes come off well. And part of the problem, I think, is that like analyzing it and reading other people's reviews and stuff, and I'm like, okay, some stuff feels overwritten. Some stuff feels overthought out. As somebody who overthinks all the time, I can see how we got to this point. You have such a monumental task on your shoulders that you have to deliver. So sometimes things don't come out, like some scenes don't come off as authentic because that scene has probably gone through 6 or 7 revisions. You can see the scientific way this conversation was put together. And so it doesn't feel natural. And I feel like that hurts certain scenes. But that being said, it still nails the feeling of when it's authentic, it feels great.
Yeah, I mean, I'll throw out there, like, I never had that gripe or that concern or issue, so I think that's always going to be like your mileage may vary. In
Same,
terms of, like,
yep,
how,
very much
how
so.
does this feel? How does this, like, because yeah, in the back of my head, I always know, okay, there's some big dialogue tree on the back end that says, okay, if you made this decision, that's going to open up this, decision to make, this conversation or something like that. Like, and so, yeah, like ultimately there's always some sort of like, well, yeah, this dialogue here does not actually know everything I've already said. It just knows the keywords that it needed to remember and to kind of flow into this. So sometimes you are going to get some little minor like, hey, yeah, you were a little bit more like angry in the last line you said, but now it's calmed down when really you'd probably still be a little angry or something like that. It's like whatever. Like those don't stick out to me. They're not a thorn in the ultimate like script of this game.
For sure. I feel a little different on that, and I think that's totally fair. For me, and I think that's why one of the reasons why our rankings of this game are so disparate. Mm-hmm. I say so disparate. I had it at 10. You had it at 6.
Yeah.
Still in the top 10. For me, also, it leads itself to, and like, I'm not going to go into this too deeply because we went into it in the spoiler cast quite a bit. Certain terms and dialogue, certain terms feeling a little out of place, with how modern those terms feel for such a, like, quote unquote, medieval world that exists in Thedas, that exists in Dragon Age. Like I mentioned when we talked about it before, I just don't think that these terms are like our modern terms. They're kind of the first ones of these terms, so they feel a little off. But in 20, 30 years, who knows how that will be felt. That being said, I'm just believing that if you want to hear further deep dive on that, Trevor and I really dig into that aspect of this game. But the other thing I want to bring up about dialogue in this game is sometimes you have like very aggressive choices that you think you're making and they don't come off very aggressive, or like sometimes, and this goes back to it also, is like your rook is never not going to be a hero.
Yeah, there's no renegade version of this rook.
Your renegade version is like the most renegade it gets is like aggressive paragon choices. There are multiple times where your rook will put do standard superhero pose, fists on hips, and have dialogue going out. And it's like very storybook, heroic stances and dialogue. You don't get to make evil choices in this game. You are always going to be the hero. Like even at your meanest, you punch a guy as part of like a dialogue choice. Dragon Age, like earlier games, like especially Dragon Age 2, really let you turn up the asshole dial. The meanest you get is maybe you say the swear word that was in the option of like the dialogue option that you were choosing. Maybe you'll say fuck. Maybe you'll say like the mean word in there. But other times it's like one of the things was like, what the hell, man, was like the option. And it's like, what happened? It feels very quote unquote proper, like a very proper approach to it. So it doesn't ever feel like, sometimes certain dialogue options just don't have the weight that you were hoping they would have. So things like that.
Yeah. All right. Let's move on to your number 6.
My number 6 is ZZZ, Zenless Zone Zero.
All right. Tell me about Zenless Zone Zero.
Zone Zero. This was my streaming game this year. If you watched my streams, thank you very much. The reason they're not currently going on is because I don't live here right now. This is a game that I really fell in love with over the streams. The story is it's a cyberpunk universe, but instead of everything being super high-tech digital, everything's super high-tech, but it's analog. So all the technology is like VHS tapes and radio dials and all sorts of cool, fun stuff that feels super retro, but at the same time super futuristic. It nails its aesthetic. It has a brilliant cast of characters that you are free to engage with in the story, as well as unlock for other side things through their gacha mechanic. This is a game that I have not spent... Oh, I've spent a little bit of money in, like a couple dollars here and there. But for the most part, this is a game that I've been playing mostly for free, and I've been having a wonderful time with it. I hopped back into it at the end of this year because they've put out content that I was just short of the end of content when I stopped streaming. It is now like they put out 2 new massive content patches since then, since the middle of last year, and now I have a bunch of content to get through. I just finished one of the chapters. It was a blast. Tons of things they've done listening to the community, getting community feedback and implementing it to really change up the way that was like the worst parts of the game, making them way more fun, or outright taking them out altogether. Really revitalizing the game towards the end of the year for me. So overall, I talked about it at length for multiple podcasts, but overall, this is a game that I think really nails its action. The action in this game is tremendous. It is one of the most stylish games of this year. If this was top 10 stylish games, this was a contender for number 1. And a lot of the characters are really great. There's a few things that I still have gripes with that were gripes that I mentioned earlier last year in the podcast. But overall, stellar game. Really, really enjoyed it. And with how much time and how much enjoyment I got out of it, there's no way it wasn't making my top 10. And the fact that I re-entered it towards the end of this year, or end of last year, and getting to play through that and enjoying that and finding out the changes they made that made the game better really helped it kind of climb up my list. So
cool. All right, Zenless Zone Zero, number 5. Moving on to my your number 6. Sorry, my number 5 game of the year, top 5.
Yes,
I know is going to be higher on your list. Metaphor Fantasia. So we will
higher on my list.
Yep. So pop over back to you for your number 5 game of the year.
Remember how in years where I play a game later in the year and it completely reshuffles my entire top 10?
Yeah. Is this where Marvel Rivals falls?
Nope. This is where Frostpunk 2 falls.
Oh, okay.
Frostpunk 2. So Frostpunk 2 is one of the games that I was like, oh man, I was really looking forward to it. I'm a massive fan of Frostpunk 1. I have well over 200 hours in Frostpunk 1. I have played through every single one of the scenarios they launched, both with the launch of the game and in patches going forward. Frostpunk is one of my favorite sim builder games that I've ever played. Frostpunk 2 takes everything about Frostpunk 1 and takes it to the next level. The layers of intricacy, the politics, the story stuff. It's not just about surviving, it's about finding a way to thrive in an Arctic post-apocalyptic world. And the approach that it takes to do that in its story campaign is instead of giving you a bunch of different scenarios, it's giving you one that you play through different periods of time through. And so it's all about taking the momentum that you start with and seeing it through to the end of the game. I'm about halfway through the campaign. That's where I stopped. And already it's top tier. I unlocked basically everything for the most part. There's going to be future stuff that I unlock later on in the story. But then I played around a little bit in free-play mode. It's kind of the sandbox version of it, and really got into some of the nitty-gritty details that I'm sure would be introduced later on in the campaign. But overall, it blew me away with the layers and levels of complexity at getting into the minutia of the life that people live in this world now. For people who don't know, Victorian era apocalypse leads to Victorian steampunk level designs. But it's all frost themed. It's all about being frozen in basically the Ice Age happens again and humanity has to survive. And the choices you make based on the society that you're building in the first game are what define that game. I think whether it's the laws and whether or not you allow religion to take root, those things are what make Frostpunk 1 so good. What makes Frostpunk 2 just as good, if not better, is the way that it accentuates that. Where instead of dealing with like a smaller population, you're now having to plan for growth. It's not, like I said, it's not about survival, it's about thriving. How do you create a thriving society when your resources are this limited, when you have to deal with new political ideologies being formed up, different political factions? One of the things they introduce here is instead of you being an overseer, you're now kind of a pseudo overseer, but you have to listen to the parliament. Parliament has different factions. The different factions have different objectives, different beliefs and ideologies. And you have to try to like figure out who you're going to placate to, who you're going to lean on to keep you kind of your prime ministership. And it works out really, really well. I've been having a blast with it. I was playing on easy mode, so just to try to, because I knew from friend of the show, Jarrett Green's review for IGN, I knew that there was a big learning curve. So I decided to not go overly ambitious with this one. Overall, been having a fantastic time with it. I think it is one of the best games of this year. There was no way with how much I love Frostpunk as a franchise that this game was not going to end up in my top 5. Especially after playing it and being like these mad lads, these geniuses, they did it again, but better. I can't recommend it enough. If you've played Frostpunk 1, Frostpunk 2 is well worth your time. It is definitively one of the best 5 games of this year, in my opinion.
Very cool. All right, moving on to number 4. My number 4 game of the year, I don't believe you played, is Balatro or Balatro.
Accurate. I did not play Balatro.
Yeah, so
a roguelike poker game? No, thank you.
Yeah, roguelike poker game. This was until like, a week or two ago was my number 5, but then like at the end of the year I was like jump back into it and I was like, yeah, no, I enjoy the experience I'm having with this a little bit more than Metaphor Refantasio. So it slotted one more back up the list for me as I was kind of putting my final rankings of everything together. So much fun, especially because it so effectively nails, much like Vampire Survivors did, that like one more run kind of mentality and vibe, and you always feel like you're or at least I still always feel like I'm unlocking some new idea or new strategy, or I've found if I use this combination of jokers that really puts me in a slot for success, so I can maybe build my deck around that kind of thing. It does a great job of giving you lots of options, but then there's also just endless like variety. One of the things I haven't really delved into too deeply is like there are challenge modes where it's like, okay, start with this particular set of stuff and try and make it through a complete run. Or I haven't done a ton of those, but just the free play kind of, all right, let me jump in with this base deck and go from here and see what I can do. I finally had like one run where I was like, oh, I'm getting like 10,000 points a hand kind of, or 10 million points a hand. And even then, like once you get to like anti-level like 12 or 13 or something like that, it's like, all right, your small anti bid is like 300 million to try. It's like, oh, there's no way I'm going to get to that. So there is still like I've not found the way to like break through the ceiling and like really maximize everything. But it's still a ton of fun, and like they added, there's fun little like customization in terms of they've been doing like the Friends of Balatro, and it's like other indie games.
Oh yeah,
where like you can like customize your King of Clubs will be this character from such and such a game or whatever, and give you a few options to do that. So I've got like Stardew cards in there. I've got Shovel Knight cards running around, and just kind of like enjoying that. And it like that's purely cosmetic, doesn't affect anything else. But shout out to Balatro. It's such a game that's like so hard to like explain, but like once you get in, you just get hands on with it and start playing it. It's like, oh, this all clicks, and it's just a ton of fun. I had a great time with it, and it's one of those that's like just always fun to go back to and just jump in and let me try. Like, let me go in with this into this run with like, this is my mission because I want to unlock this specific Joker. Like, oh, there's a Joker that I can unlock if I discard a royal flush. Cool. I'm going to just try and unlock that Joker this run. I'm just going to try and get a royal flush in my hand just so I can discard it and, throw it away. And yeah, just fun stuff like that. So shout out to Blatcher, my number 4 game of the year. What's your number 4, Cam?
Marvel Rivals.
Marvel Rivals. All right.
That's right.
Hit me with Marvel Rivals.
Marvel Rivals is a hero arena shooter based around the Marvel IP property. They're going full multiverse on this one, so you're going to get heroes from different timelines, different versions of their universe, etc. Overall, though, it's essentially a 6v6 hero shooter, but they're bringing in the Marvel goodness here. I will say the reason why it's number 4 for me is because there were better games that came out this year. This came out at the very end of the year. It's dealing with some stuff that I feel is like if this was 5 years ago and this game came out, I'd be like, this is my number 1. But with a lack of the thing about it, there's a ton of lore and narrative in this game, but it's all delivered through options and menus that you go into and select to read the background lore of this hero, etc. It's all options there, and that's great. But the fact none of it's voiced, it's all just all plain written. And also that it's incomplete. They're going to be releasing more and more of it over the course of the year. But when you read through this, you find out that there's some really damn good Marvel stories being told in this. And the fact that it's being presented in this way is a bit of a letdown. Because if there's one thing that Overwatch failed at, it was capitalizing on their heroes and their stories. And telling that in a PvE mode or in some sort of storytelling moment. They really dropped the ball on that, among other things with Overwatch and Overwatch 2. So seeing very much we put it in this corner over here for people who want it, but it's just all text, it's all written. It's a little sad and disappointing. I know that these stories are integral to the levels that you're playing on and relate to it, but yeah, there's also some characters mentioned in these stories that are not currently in the game right now. And it's okay, well, that's difficult, okay. They're doing the right thing with voicing lines at the beginning of matches where they make reference to this overarching story, which I think is great. When Spider-Man meets Cloak and Dagger, they reference, oh, I haven't seen you since this fight on this bridge. What happened? Oh, you're never going to believe it. Morbius came and saved me. I'm
gonna throw this out there. If you polled 100 people who played Marvel Rivals, is this a game about gameplay or a game about story? 100% of them are going to say it's a game about gameplay.
100%.
So I don't know why we're diving so much into the story.
I'm diving in because this is the reason why it's not number 1.
Okay.
Because gameplay-wise, this game is exquisite.
Mm-hmm.
I'm a Moon Knight main right now. MK mains. Shout out to you. We're awesome. I love us. We're great. For those of you who are on it, and so I can't insta-lock my DPS character, Moon Knight, shame on you, but not really. Are
you playing ranked?
I'm not playing ranked because ranked is not cross-play.
Okay.
And I don't want to get better just playing other PlayStation players. I want to get better playing against people who are on wherever they're at. So because of that, the crossplay feature...
You pretentious piece of shit. Shut up. Get better against PlayStation people, and then when you can come back and play it on PC, you'll get better against PC people.
But no, this is why I've been playing it. If I play regular mode, I get to play against people across platform.
Whatever.
So I have a harder time sometimes in matches where
but it does nothing for you. It means nothing to beat them in regular mode. Because you're matchmaking against a regular blot of people instead of people that are trying to play this competitively, right?
It's true.
Yeah.
This is the hard part about it. So
the people that you want to be trying to get better against have moved over to ranked, so they're not playing you.
That's fair.
Yeah. Haha.
Also,
I've destroyed your argument. Now, now talk about the gameplay.
Well, I also want to mention that I still find more competent teams in free play than I do in competitive. So that's another reason too. Anyway, but onto the gameplay itself. Characters are broken up into vanguards, which are your tanks, duelists, who are your DPS characters, and then strategists, who are your healers. the great thing about it is that there is team up abilities where, depending on the heroes you choose, based on their comic book history, or like teams that they've been on, they'll have team up abilities with it. Moon Knight teams up with Cloak and Dagger, where because Moonlight is able to channel their power through his Ankh, he can cast a field where essentially he's invisible in it for a short period of time. And it's an additional ability you get. If you're playing Cloak and Dagger, you get an increased percentage of damage and / healing that you can do. So there's certain heroes that get buffs out of it, and certain heroes that get brand new abilities out of it. A great example of this is Hulk. If you choose Hulk and then somebody else chooses Doctor Strange or Iron Man, because they're all Avengers, Hulk radiates their abilities, so they're more powerful. And with Iron Man and Hulk is a devastating combo to try to fight against. Because Iron Man's up in the sky, he's shooting pulsar blasts at you, but then he activates his supercharged ability, and all of a sudden it does way more damage, and it's way more threatening. So there's that level aspect of it. Doctor Strange has a kind of like, after Doctor Strange does enough damage, he builds up a meter, and then you hit the button, and that meter does like a 360 radius explosion ability that damages everybody. And if he gets to 100 and you don't expel the darkness, you can't be healed. So you have to manage that. You want to get it high up, but you don't want to get it. You have to like manage your timing on that very well. That's given buffs by radiation.
Have you done the move I see a lot in like little clips as Doctor Strange of creating a portal right in front of the like enemy's spawn point at the beginning of the match to just they all jump out and die?
Yes.
You've done that?
Yeah.
Yep.
I've done that.
Cool.
I've also set up so they are facing a Punisher turret right out of the gate.
There you go. One I saw that looked like it was a really clutch play was it was kind of the inverse. They created a portal that caught a whole bunch of characters that the enemy team's Jeff was shooting off the map. So basically like Jeff shot it and they went straight into the portal and like we're safe.
Yep. I've also seen it where teammates troll each other and put it in front of put the portal off the ledge. And so you're like, okay, cool. Everybody jump through it. This is why I always look before I go through any portal. Also, before I go through any door, because that's, like I mentioned earlier, that's a problem.
Yep.
Some people don't look.
I've seen somebody create the portal on top of a portal and just have a Loki jump in and do the whole like I've been falling for 30 minutes moment.
Yep. There's that. There's also
anyway, lots of fun little combos and attacks and uses of attacks and stuff.
Team up abilities are awesome as hell. Everything's just really great and works incredibly well with coordinated attacks. Or if you're playing solo, it's a great time.
Cool. All right. Diving into top 3, where I feel like we've probably got very few like that we haven't already covered yet. But my number 3 might still be higher on your list. I don't know. My number 3 is Astrobot.
It is one higher on my list.
It is one higher on your list. All right. Then we will talk about your number 3 instead.
It's going to be higher on your list. Final Fantasy VII Rebirth.
That is indeed higher on my list. So our number 3s, real quick and done. So moving on to our number 2s. My number 2 game of the year. I don't believe you played Like a Dragon Infinite Wealth.
I did not play it. Okay. Yep. So let's go ahead and talk about it.
So Like a Dragon Infinite Wealth. I didn't get into the Like a Dragon series until the Like a Dragon came out. And when that came out and people were like, oh my god, this is such a good like JRPG, I was like, that didn't seem like what the Yakuza games had been.
They weren't.
And I was like, oh, it's because it's not. It's a very specific diversion from that character. So back when Like a Dragon came out, I didn't end up playing it like the year Like a Dragon came out. But in the, quiet spring after that Game of the Year stuff, I was like, all right, let me jump in, played Yakuza Kiwami 1, 2, and Yakuza 0. And I was like, okay, I've played enough. I'm going to just jump ahead to Like a Dragon now. And had a great time with it and loved kind of that whole experience. And when Like a Dragon Infinite Wealth came out this year, or 2024 last year. I did kind of the same thing. Like in the lead up to it, when I was looking for stuff to play at the beginning of last year, I went back to Yakuza 3 and 4 and played those. And then also played through the Like a Dragon Gaiden, The Man Who Erased His Name. So like the spin-off right before kind of all this other stuff. So I kind of knew where Kiryu was going into the events of Like a Dragon Infinite Wealth, and then I obviously knew where Ichiban had been from Like a Dragon.
So you still haven't played 5 and 6 yet?
I still have not played 5 and 6.
Okay.
5 and 6 are kind of the outliers, but
you know what
I
happens.
know enough of the big beats of those. And one of the great things about Like a Dragon Infinite Wealth is, so it's a split game where you're playing kind of, you swap off in chapters between playing Ichiban Kasuga as your protagonist, and then Kazuma Kiryu, or Kiryu Kazuma, whatever, Kiryu, Kazuma Kiryu. So like one chapter you're playing Ichiban, chapter you're playing Kiryu, but it's all still like RPG is. There, like, you do eventually unlock abilities for like Kazuma where like it lets you turn the game into kind of the action, sequence for like a limited amount of time, so you can just kind of be a brawler and kind of do that. It's a fun little element.
That's cool.
But yeah, it is absolutely like minor spoilers, but it's in the trailers and stuff. Like Kiryu is like dying of cancer basically in this game and is kind of on like his last legs. It's very much like it's going to be his last hurrah. And so there's a good chunk of the game that is Kazuma kind of going down memory lane, and it's like revisiting places in Kamurocho, and it takes you back and does like little flashbacks to earlier games in the series. And it's him kind of saying goodbye to, those moments of his past and stuff like that. So there are a lot that I recognized from, the games I've played, but then there were a few where like, okay, this is very clearly like a game 5 thing or a game 6 thing. But you get enough of like the context from everything. So just so much fun, so much joy, and as with all the Yakuza Like a Dragon things, like the breadth of things you can do in the game and the wild sub stories that you have all over the place just make like the core story absolute like heavy hitting, hard hitting, Ichiban's trying to find his like long lost mother. Kiryu's dealing with death.
Yeah.
And then, a sub story. Okay, I'm going on a trolley, and it's a Pokemon Snap game, but instead of taking pictures of like creatures in the wild, I'm taking pictures of sickos, and it's just men running around with like thongs and like butterfly masks, and you just have to get them in frame. And the in-game thing is like, okay, there's like a geo-tracking tied to your camera, so when you take a picture, the police are going to come and grab these sickos off the streets and like make Hawaii safer for the kids. But it's basically just like, okay, here's a little Pokemon Snap level.
Yeah.
And just like the wild, silly things like that make this so much fun. There is a whole other, like, you are going around and the enemies you fight, eventually you can like basically it's the Sujimon tournament where you turn them into Pokemon basically, and you battle your sickos against like the other trainers sickos and stuff like that. And so yeah, there's so much fun like meta thing. This one had the big like Animal Crossing style like Dodoku Island kind of thing where I just poured so much time and like a good 20 hours into just building up my island to make it a 5-star resort. And that's a whole other fun thing because you eventually like unlock buildings from the earlier games. You can build like a little mini Kamurocho if you want and have, the different characters that you unlock either through this game or through like the DLC and kind of like, pre-order bonus stuff. You can have Kiryu running around on this little, a like Kiwami 1 era or even a Yakuza 0 era Kiryu running around with a Majima and other like Dojima and stuff can be on there. And it's just so much fun. There's so much love and care, and this like especially this being like the Brit like Yakuza Like a Dragon was an interesting one of like, okay, we're moving away from Kiryu's story. He still makes a little pop-up appearance in there, but it is very much like this is the new protagonist that we're going to have kind of moving forward. And then having that like combined with the Kiryu-ness of this one was a great blending of like, we're going to like combine both these worlds. But Kiryu, a lot of fun and does like a lot of great stuff in the JRPG-ness of it all. And that's one of the things that I found so impressive back when I played like Yakuza Like a Dragon, of like how wonderfully they turned so many of the staples of like the action games into JRPG stuff. And they just do a great job of that again in this one. The job systems of this is always fun as it was in the last one. You like in this one, you get like, oh, you can be like, a Wild West shooter, and so you're just out there as like a gunslinger kind of thing, or a football player, or a luau dancer because we're in Hawaii kind of stuff, like a fire spinner, and like those are the jobs that you can get that you pick up in this game that just are a ton of fun, and so much creativity in the series in these games as they like the combination of these games, Yakuza Like a Dragon and Infinite Wealth, have made me a fan of the bigger Yakuza games as a whole. And I look forward to, I'm absolutely looking forward to the like spin-off we get here in the spring. It's like my most anticipated game right now, of like the Yakuza pirate game where you're playing as Majima as a pirate. And it looks like that's going to like add in some like, the Assassin's Creed naval combat stuff, but still in the Hawaii setting and playing with, all sorts of silliness of that. And so I'm going to get to see, I'm sure, characters that I met in Infinite Wealth are going to pop up, and Majima is going to be interacting with them and dealing with them now. So so much fun, such a joyous kind of experience, and just silly craziness. Fighting giant sharks. Danny Trejos is one of the bad guys in Infinite Wealth, and you get into a fight with him on a boat with a giant shark that like the shark will come and like just grab guys if they're in a specific spot on the boat. Like the shark will use its turn to basically chomp some guys and just spit them out at you. And so much fun and just wild, silly stupidness. Love the series and just the silly, funny places they go with it. So shout outs to Like a Dragon Infinite Wealth, my runner-up game of 2024. Hit me with yours. You said Astrobot's your number 2, right?
Astrobot's my number 2.
Astrobot, your number 2. All right. So then I know what your number 1 is going to be.
Yep.
Let's talk Astrobot. You gave it number 2. So why is Astrobot your number 2 game of the year here, Cam?
Astrobot is a game that is built on legacy of the PlayStation brand and beyond. The amount of love that went into Astrobot as they pull characters from legacy games from the system to even bring in third-party characters to kind of be reveals was stupendous. And that right away, it's easy to be like, oh my gosh, well, this was my favorite bot. Oh, this was my favorite bot. Well, I love dressing Astrobot up as this. There's that aspect and level of it that is like very much at the forefront of my thoughts and feelings about Astrobot. But underneath all of that is the fact that Astrobot is the best platforming game that I think we've had in years. I think it's a franchise-defining game. Astrobot kind of coming from Rescue Mission for the PSVR to Playroom, kind of as the introduction, like the included game for the PlayStation 5, to now getting a full title in his own right and being this just absolute stellar, just perfect platforming game that is extremely unique to itself, but also looks back at the aspects of what makes Astrobot as a franchise, whether it's the creature designs, it's the level designs, all of that feeling unique to it, to introducing like new mechanics and new abilities that come with different levels that just continue to astound me the entire time I was playing it. From the moment I launched it to the moment I handed the disc back to you, I never stopped having an incredible time with this game. There were no valleys. It's all peak. And there's something about that just spoke to me as, the kid who, my first video game was Super Mario Brothers 3. The kind of like aged, I don't look back at platformers the way that I used to. I don't enjoy them the way that I used to. And this is a game that not only did I have a great time experiencing and having fun, it played the way platformers I remember them playing. And it brought back a nostalgia that doesn't actually exist. Like, it's weird that, like, because platformers were never that good back then, like this good back then. But the fact that it feels that way, the illusion of nostalgia that it gave me, this feeling of fulfillment that I got from completing a level and getting all the Astrobots in the first round. Like, first run, getting all the Astrobots, great. The puzzling and piecing together, like, where is this Astrobot at that I missed? Going back, really digging through, exploring levels, exploring worlds.
Where's the secret level?
Where's the secret level? Like, I'm not a collectibles guy. I don't do collectibles. I was doing collectibles in this game. The way that unlocking more and more collectibles led you to getting more and more Astrobots, that led you to unlocking more and more stuff on your home level. It's just brilliant insight over and over and over again, coming through and paying off what it's promising. It's promising you an incredible experience, and it gives you that bar none. There's no low points in Astrobot. It's a all revved up engine that just continues to go and never stops until you're done playing.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, Astrobot, my number 3, and it was really like, it was a hard thing, but I just loved my number 1 and number 2. Like, I would say all of my number 3s or my top 3 are all 10 out of 10 games.
100%.
Had a great time with them. And like even Balatro and like Metaphor Refantasio, like my number 4 and 5, 10 out of 10s for what they're doing as well. But like, yeah, Astrobot was such a great time and such a joy. And even without, like, it definitely benefits from the like PlayStation nostalgia, but I don't know what half of these bots are because I have a lot of like severe like blind spots in terms of like PlayStation franchises and stuff like that. I always say it like the PS1 for me was basically a Final Fantasy system that I also played Harvest Moon Harvest Moon Back to Nature on.
Yeah.
Like, I played so few other PlayStation 1 genre things. I was still largely a Nintendo person at that time. And then, they're just like a whole bunch of franchises across PlayStation where like I didn't gravitate towards those. So like I was confused, Resistance and Killzone or stuff like that. But like still cool seeing them pop up. And so even without like the PlayStation innate love in here, it is absolutely a great platformer. I love that the abilities that you get throughout the base game are all just abilities for Astrobot, and then you get the fun like PlayStation themed ability and level at the end of each zone, at the end of each galaxy kind of thing, and that being a fun like, okay, cool, yeah, this is absolutely a love letter to your God of War, or here's the love letter to Horizon, or here's the love letter to Uncharted. Like, absolutely love those sequences. But like they're fun. Like the Loco Roco one doesn't do a lot for me. The Ape Escape one doesn't do a lot for me.
Oh, Ape Escape does a lot.
They're fun in terms of like the level itself, but it's like, oh, this was like I'm getting more out of seeing all the little Easter egg things that I recognize from Uncharted. Cool, great, but it's still also just a fun little shooter of a level.
As somebody who doesn't care for the Uncharted franchise as a whole, loved the Uncharted level.
Yeah.
Loved it. Had a great time with it. I will say, Loco Roco unlocked, like we talked about it when we reviewed it in the spoiler cast for it, unlocked a core memory I had completely forgotten about. Mm-hmm. That are like, I once spent hours in a GameStop, ignored by the staff because it was like dirt, like I don't know why. But they just let me play the entirety of Loco Roco on the PSP in a GameStop. And it like unlocked, I'm like, was like a That's So Raven, like flat, like not the future, but like a flashback, but like a whoa. I totally had forgotten about that. And instead, but it's also one of the reasons why I have such nostalgia for a GameStop. It's like, it's incredible. This game is just next level. Sorry for interrupting you.
Yeah, no. And then the added little bonus there being, okay, yeah, when you do get a bot that is a fun bot that you recognize, and I love in it, there are a lot of places where they put them in like fun thematic areas, like, you know, getting the horror, you know, game, your Resident Evils or your Silent Hill bots in the spooky level kind of thing that is like the cemetery ghost, you know, graveyard or something like that. Those being fun little other, you know, avenues to all of this silliness. I especially love something you probably didn't get to experience because you handed me back the disc. They did the, you know, the 5 weeks of here's a new speed run level kind of thing that you can kind of play, and each of those had a couple new bots to them. A lot of them being like, you know, Helldiver bots and stuff like that.
Oh,
and then, and, you know, other little series. But then they, especially, you know, in the lead up to Christmas, basically they released here's a, you know, an extra, you know, Winter Wonderland kind of level that was just, you know, a one world thing that you go to, and you are unlocking, you know, bots from around the thing, as well as like some extra skins and extra like controller, the ship paint jobs kind of thing.
Oh, cool. Yeah.
But that one, spoilers for that, being like, hey, finally, here's where Spider-Man and Miles Morales were.
Oh,
like, they
cool.
put those two in that, and that was like the big like, here's your Christmas gift. Here's your Spider-Man bot. Here's your Miles Morales.
Very
bot.
in theme with Spider-Man Miles Morales.
Yeah.
Very in theme with it.
And like when you do everything in that world, you get an outfit that lets you run around as a Santa Claus Astrobot. Being a fun little charming thing. Still, it also like there's like I think that's where you get a Gex and a Croc, I think. Maybe not Gex.
Oh.
I don't know. But like there were a few others where it was like, oh, here were some of the other notable absences from the base game. They were there in the holiday level. Still notable absence in terms of like a lot of the Square Enix, like the fact that they just kind of said no for whatever reason to allowing a lot of their presence there. Disappointing.
That sucks.
But it'd be fun to like hopefully they can still have these conversations and Square Enix can agree, and they'll just be like, okay, yeah, go ahead, and here's the Final Fantasy, you know, expansion, you know, that the free downloadable thing.
Oh, that'd be so sick.
And you get like another world that is, okay, here is the galaxy that is, you know, each of the different Final Fantasy, you know, here's all the Final Fantasy 7 characters and the 8 characters and the, you know, your Final Fantasy 10 and all that stuff. It'd be great, you know, getting a couple extra bots of each of those, and then maybe here's the Final Fantasy 7, you know, theme world or something like that. But, you know, even without that, absolutely a stellar game, and just such wonderful, fun platforming. The boss fights are always felt like a fun challenge that was using, you know, the mechanics of whatever kind of little add-on had been introduced in the same way that, you know, all those Mario games of old had done. Just such a love letter to platformers and a love letter to PlayStation, and a game that I think could absolutely still. It wouldn't, unfortunately, just because of how the industry works, I don't think it would have made as big waves if it didn't have all the PlayStation love.
True.
We know that because Astro Rescue Mission didn't make all the same waves that Astro's Playroom did, and then now this game has, now that they have all of the PlayStation IP thrown in on top of it. But absolutely a ton of fun and such a great experience. So shout out to Astrobot as Cameron's number 2 and my number 3. And so now we get to our number ones. And as I know what my number 1 is, and I have been able to deduce what your number 1 is.
Yep.
I'm going to actually throw to you first because your number 1 is going to come out to number 2 in our overall rankings for the year.
And that tells me what number 1.
Sorry. It actually comes number 3 behind our mutual love of Astrobot. So yes.
Fair.
And then my game will ultimately be our number 1. So our number 3 game of the year, your number 1 game of the year. Take it away, Cameron.
Sure. Not gonna lie, I thought putting Final Fantasy VII Rebirth would be a big enough throw that
You're trying to play the game to put this game at number 1.
Put Astrobot at number 1.
Oh, put Astrobot.
So we can be like every other outlet and chose Astrobot as our game of the year. No, I'm joking.
It's the top three all come within 1 point of each other. So
I figured. No, this is true to my feelings about it. Final Fantasy VII Rebirth, like an incredible game. Would have been game of the year just about any other year. But for me, Metaphor Refantasio, when it comes to game of the year,
your game of the year, Metaphor Refantasio.
Yeah, right.
I don't want to gloss over that because we mentioned a couple games there.
That's fair. Also, like, how pissed off would you have been if I put Marvel Rivals above Final Fantasy VII Rebirth?
I wouldn't have.
Okay,
wouldn't have. Like, I would have gotten it given how much I know you love Marvel Rivals.
I've put over 90 hours into it.
Yeah,
but that's because I'm unemployed right now. So, Metaphor Refantasio is a game that has lived with me since I finished playing it. I'm about halfway through, or not even like a quarter of the way through my second playthrough of it before I moved on to other games. Metaphor is a metaphor. It's a metaphor for our world. It's a reflection of our world and our ideas and our concepts put against a background and backdrop of the fantasy of literature and of great works. Whether it's the kind of watercolored graphical sense that the game has, whether it's like this game is art-wise is off the charts. If the game of the year was determined by menu UI, this would have blown everybody else out of the water. Artistically, this game is just off the freaking chain. It's so damn good. And I think just on a surface level, that alone is why it's one of the top 10 games of the year. I think it's the hidden layers and depths of its turn-based combat also adds to that as well. The fact that on surface, it's like, oh, it's turn-based combat. It can get so much deeper than that, depending on what choices you make and what actions you take. How do you, the way that you stagger out turns and the way that you can do things to take advantage of that is just absolutely phenomenal. And the way that the archetypes, the quote-unquote personas for this game, are able to give a different feeling, different play style, depending on which archetype you're choosing. It's not just, oh, this is the sword one, this is the magic one, this is the tank one. You get really far out there, whether it's the, what is it? Is Persona Master is one of them, where you basically, based on the equipment that you have as an accessory, you can choose different masks that when you use it, gives you a whole new mix of gameplay opportunities. The merchant one, where you basically run around the real world while you're running around, hitting things with an abacus, is just phenomenal. Much less the, is it entrepreneur? I'm trying to remember what the last archetype. Tycoon being focused on gaining more money and also attacking people with money. Mm-hmm. Basically saying like, strength is not the only source of, or martial ability is not the only source of strength for a person. Their abilities to use the...
Turns out even in Metaphor Refantasio, capitalism, absolutely broken.
Absolutely broken.
Absolutely
so broken.
One-shot a whole bunch of things with money.
Yep. And the fact that it keeps giving you more and more while you're running around hitting stuff with your abacus, brilliant. It's like real life capitalism. Using capitalism with inherent violence will eventually put you on top. Once again, metaphor, great metaphor. But really, what it's the kind of reflection that I take from the game itself is really what it talks about for us as people, and what it talks about, and its themes on discovering like, what does it mean to be a democracy? What does it mean to be a democratic society? What does it mean to have every single person having a voice, and what dangers are there in that, as well as what benefits there are? This is a world where they've had kings consistently, but now there's no king. And the last king is using his god magic to basically force everybody to go along with democracy. Phenomenal. That's the setup of the game, to basically be like, that's how we're introducing a democratic system. But where it goes with that, it explores themes of fascism, theocracy, those paralleled with themes of racism, and because racism is for real here, there are different races of people, and where their hierarchy is at in the the social economic system is made very clear that there are people who benefit from the system and people who don't. And it's reflected in their choices, and it's reflected in your characters, that you as a character gather a party made up of every other single race. And at first it's like, oh, that's like, yeah, because it's the quality one. And it's like, that is picked up on big by the end of the game. That people look at your character as a candidate of somebody who has chosen somebody who represents everyone. And you're placed up against theocracy and fascism inherently. And you kind of get to see why these theories of government work, why they are appealing, why people seek them out. Theocracy is such a spiritual and emotionally fulfilling government. Well, of course, we're always going to make the right decisions as a government because God is our true governor. And his chosen person to lead us is also the chosen person of our religion. Like, it makes sense. Deus Vult, God blesses us with this. Like, that's it right there. And you see how it affects people who are in tumultuous circumstances with the growing human threat rising up and being there. The alternative is a outright dog-eat-dog fascist regime, or the guy that we've been following already is now just also going to be in charge of the government. That safety, that feeling of safety is like, and you see that being used and abused by people with power. As certain revelations come through in the game, the way that this game is able to really take you through the steps of like, how does fascism work? Like, fascism works because people feel secure and strong. I back the strongest guy. The strongest guy is going to be in charge, and he's going to make me feel safe. There is an appeal to that. And in the year of 2024, where we had the re-election of Donald Trump, nothing spoke more to that than the uncertainty of the world and the times that we're in, and people clinging to strong men and fascism really coming full circle. This game, perfect time for it to come out, to see kind of like, we get our own, definitely not as handsome Louis, but we also see the shortcomings of democracy. Democracy is not a perfect system because there'll always be people who stand as candidates for certain ideologies, and we see that happen. We saw that happen in our real world. Everybody knows how bad things were in 2020. Everybody knows how things got worse because of who we had in charge. But people, granted, a lot less people voted this time around as well, overall, and we could get into the...
I mean, that's where the biggest disconnect between the metaphor here is and the real world is. Like, in metaphor of Fantasio, everyone is magically making their vote known. Yeah. Whereas like the realistic thing in metaphor would be like, all right, half of the faces are blank because too many people aren't voting. So it's like, all right, you're overpowered by, the slightest of people. Yep.
That's a fair point to that as well. But I think what it does is it really, this metaphor allows you to explore what it means to govern, and what does it mean to be. And this is where I think the strength of it not having romantic options comes into play. Why it isn't going into the persona aspect of it is, one, also age variations greatly shift depending on your race. Hulkenberg is 100+ years your senior. There's one race that literally doesn't age. They just always look like old men. So we have that facet and aspect of it. But when you're looking at, especially when you're really observing the times that we were in 2024 with the appeal of fascism, the appeal of strongmen, the appeal of, I have the strength, I will protect you, but you have to do everything I say. A tyrant doesn't become a tyrant because he was hiding that he was a good guy the entire time. A tyrant, a true tyrant, tells you who you are and is selected to be that and is chosen to be that person anyway. Nobody didn't know who Donald Trump was. Everyone knew who Donald Trump was when he got elected, and people chose for him. And honestly, I have a lot better understanding of, and I'm at way less of a confused place of how did we end up here again? It's no, I understand. The appeal is there. And it's a basic human appeal. It is the appeal for, I want security and safety for me and my future. Now, is it going to work out? Fascism never works out, period. Fascism works out for the people who are in charge and the people who already have. It never works out for the people who have not. And like we don't have to explore that in this game because, triumphantly.
I mean, like the game to its credit does explore the idea that like, oh, like it much like the people that are voting for a fascist kind of thing. It's, oh, they're voting because they're believing the lies they've been told, or they don't have the information. The access to information in Metaphor Fantasio, as well as in the real world, is a huge factor in
Absolutely
what sways you to make a decision.
I was just about to get to that. Propaganda and political messaging is such a major part of this game. And they really do focus on it. It's like, yeah, you can say all the right things about the right issues, but if your strategy is like, vote for me, I'm the best, it's not going to give you as much, like, you're not going to get that much leeway. The two political people that you're up against who are number one and number two for the entire game or for the majority of the game, are already pre-established candidates. They're already pre-established power, like people with power and resources and means. And you are a literally grassroots campaign starting up with nothing but a hope and a dream and a sky, or like a sky runner, or not a sky runner. Well, it becomes one, but anyway, the entire purpose of showing that power is where people believe it to be. The power of belief is the core part of what Metaphor is trying to do and what it's trying to tell you, to the part where it asks you at the beginning of the game, do you believe there's power in fiction? Do you believe that a story can change the world? I'm this also, why is this game my number one game of the year? Because I'm a media analyst. That's what I went to school for. This is hitting every single check box for me as for like what I look for in games. And it's delivering on it in all cylinders. And the way that it explores its themes that it does, while also taking you through a like quote unquote traditional hero's journey, really taking things and putting them on their head when it comes to like what you expect from an Atlas game. It really like nails everything it's going for and then some. And I really just cannot emphasize how much this game helped me see, like, as somebody who's been forced to work in marketing for the last several years, I've lost a lot of what I loved about a media analysis, and Metaphor Fantasio helped me rediscover that. The power of propaganda, the power of messaging, and the power of a story is unparalleled. And that's explored through this game through quote-unquote physical means, the physical means of using archetypes, but it's true in our world as well. And the answer to the question of, can a work of fiction inspire the real world? The answer is yes.
Yeah. As I said, like it's my number 5, but only because I liked the other things that came above it better. Like it is absolutely was a 10 out of 10 game. Had a great time with it, and this is the in my write up I talk about this is the poster child of why demos can be so great, because this was very much a game I was going to completely skip this year. And then, word of mouth was pretty good on the game. So I was like, oh, and it's got a demo that I can just jump in and play the prologue for. Cool, I'll do that. And was hooked. I was like, I didn't realize. Over. Yep, it carries over. I didn't realize how much I had missed the Persona, like wanting that kind of Persona gameplay experience. And especially because, I didn't really vibe with the Persona 3 one that I'd had, in 2023. So kind of really getting to go back to the things I love, and this is very much like Persona 5, base Persona 5, but still Persona 5 flavored, and did a great job of like capturing that feel. And I loved that like this one didn't have the time crunch of things. Like I had plenty of time to do all of the things I wanted to do, and the game lets you, it has so many quality of life things in terms of like the gameplay of a Persona, like of hey, like here are the people that you can level up your relationship with them if you want. I love that there wasn't the thing that's common in the Personas of like, hey, you need to like get a few points for them first, so your level's not going to increase just yet. I love that like that's done away with. Instead, the variation of that is like, oh, that just gives you like a little bit of the magic spending power or whatever that you have. Like you boost up that currency. And then the stories of this were so great, and how so many of them tie into the overall larger themes of everything was delightful, wonderful. There were only like one or two that I was like, that arc that story arc didn't really hit for me as much as I would have liked some other stuff. But maybe I enjoyed the benefits that I got instead, or something like that. Everything felt worthwhile in doing and exploring, and it was a ton of fun. Loved the again the uniqueness of the dungeons, and the monsters that you're fighting throughout the game was a lot of fun. And then also the side mission things, like, hey, here's a tower that you're going to go to, and the towers might have the same kind of layout, but there's a reason for that you find kind of in some end game missions and stuff like that. It was like a game from a gameplay stance, as somebody who played through it twice and got the platinum on this one too. A ton of fun. This one, more than probably Personas that I've played in the past, you had to really be on the ball with elemental weaknesses and exploits, and even status effects, and really knowing how to strategically face off against an enemy. And because this didn't have the baton pass kind of mechanic of some of the other stuff, there was the because you can't swap archetypes mid-fight, in the way that you have your protagonist that has a big maybe 8 archetypes or personas that you can swap through. You might go into a fight and you might not be able to finish that fight, and you gotta you gotta run away, swap out your build, and then try it again or something like that. I thought that was a gameplay wise and RPG strategy wise was okay, cool. I gotta really think about how I'm going to approach this fight, or I've got to really get the gear makeup right for some of these end boss, end side quest super boss fights where I can't have that ability or they will have a insta kill attack on me. So I gotta find gear that will still make me strong against them, but not trigger that insta kill attack.
Yeah.
What's that makeup gonna look like? And then I did in my second playthrough of things, I did absolutely just super cheese the ultimate boss by using. There's a meal that you can make that basically gives you 4 extra turns.
Yeah.
And I just over the course of the run, I made 10 of those, and basically I just one-shotted the super boss at the end of the New Game Plus run, because I just would use all of my turns, and then on the last one I'd eat another one of those meals. And
that's what's up.
Just keep
I
just basically just let my party go through and deliver 30 attacks on this enemy before they even got to take their turn. So shout outs to a game that lets you do that against the hardest super boss of the fight, and everything.
The game lets you cheat with money.
Yeah.
Outright. Yep. You can beat any boss with money.
Yep. So yeah, shout outs to Metaphoria Fantasio, and then I you already touched on a lot of the great story aspects of it, and I love the other benefit of this not being a Persona is you're not locked into high school drama and stories. This can be a bigger epic tale, and your character is a little bit older, and the other characters around you are older and have a different life experience. I still would have liked a little of the romance stuff, just because I enjoy that flavor of the Persona games. But
for sure.
Ultimately,
it wouldn't have been hurt by it by any means. But, I will also say another thing I want to mention when we talk about characters. Characters in this game are stellar. So the best cast of characters that I think we see this year. My personal favorite cast of characters, which is saying something because Final Fantasy VII Rebirth this year.
Yeah.
And I will for sure gush over it when we get to it. But one aspect of this, of one of the characters is Stroll's his story is based off of a principle called noblesse obligée, which is the obligation of nobility. And that is what his story revolves around. His personal struggle revolves around, is what is the obligation of nobility. the earnestness in which it pursues that story, rather than being like, well, we got democracy now. To being turning it from being the obligation of ability to the obligation of those with power, and the obligation of those with means, and really helping Stroll evolve himself into the kind of character that is kind of like his quote unquote ideal self throughout the game, and the way that is applied across the board to every character. Every character goes through enormous transformation, whether they're party members of yours or not. And it's based on their journey through their own personal quote-unquote hero's journey that they end up where they're at the end. And I did not, even the one that I think is like the least interesting one, still had really important lessons to teach. I forgot the captain guard's name, that one where it unlocks the general and commander archetype. I think I've heard commonly people found his to be the least interesting.
Yeah, he's one of the ones that I think of when I think of like, I didn't like care about his story too much.
But his story tells a lot about like, oh, we're looking at democracy on a grand scale, but let's look at kind of a quote unquote democracy on a small scale. If security is your only purpose and you do not have good PR, you will be outmaneuvered and outgunned and outplayed. But it also shows the importance of strength and military, though, because when the chips are down and you need that force, you need that strength. So it also shows the virtue of what it means to have strength. And I think like these two parallels that they're showing just with Stroll and the captain are great parallels to look for that. But that's across the board for every single character. I mentioned earlier, like there's an entire like part of the population that wants to be a theocracy. And when one of your party members is not just a different like race, but also a different religion than everybody else, what does her journey look like? It goes across like we can literally go through each of the characters, and that is nailed throughout it. It's the art, like the fact that this is entirely held up in one package is why it's my game of the year.
Yeah, it was like Barden was the
he even has the most boring name in the game too.
Yeah. Anyway, Metaphor Fantasio, a phenomenal game, great experience overall, absolutely.
Could use with more voice acting though.
Yeah, I think that is another struggle that like again goes to like this was like the Persona 5 version instead of like the Persona 5 Royal of the social links in this only being voiced on like their first and last one instead of all the ones in between as well. Was a letdown, and then plenty of other stuff where it's like, okay, there's no reason this couldn't have been voiced, apart from they just didn't put the resources into it. Lets it drop a little bit. Yeah. But yeah, my number one, as alluded to, Final Fantasy VII Rebirth, was such a like it. The 1-2 punch I had at the beginning of the year of Like a Dragon Infinite Wealth and Final Fantasy VII Rebirth, like those basically like it hit the ground running, and I was like, those are the games to beat this year, and nothing ever really did come back and top bill them. I did jump back here in the last week of the year or something just to like refresh and like check in on Final Fantasy VII Rebirth. Like started kind of like replaying through it and just having a grand old time with it again, just in the opening grasslands area. The only like gripe I really have with Final Fantasy VII Rebirth is that they made some of the like super challenges just too difficult, and I'm just not gonna get the platinum in this game, which is frustrating and disappointing. Like I could probably go back and like try and suffer my way through some of the last hard chapters that I didn't do, but like knowing that I would have to try and do the Gilgamesh fight in hard mode is like, I'm never going to get that done. So
having to do the Sephiroth fight at the end of the game in hard mode with Aerith and Cloud.
For me, it's always the Rufus. I always hate the Rufus fights because they like he's built in such a way that like requires you to really use like Cloud's parry stuff, which is just never the way I play the game. And so like I remember playing in normal mode being like, I fucking hate this boss. Fuck you, Rufus. I'm never going to be able to get him in hard mode. And I never bothered. So like, I have my qualms about that, but the game itself, the base game, when I'm not trying to 100% it, is such a wonderful time. Great performances again all around, incredible cast of characters, building on what Remake had already done so incredibly well. and then adding in, a handful of new characters around this time, getting to see some of the new characters introduced in Remake kind of making return appearances here in Rebirth was a fun surprise. The Queen's Blood game being such one of the fun mini games of the year of this year was such a delight, and it just doing a great job of doing what Remake did in all of the fun and surprising ways, but within the confines of Midgar, to open that up and to go on so much more of the journey of the original Final Fantasy VII in this, of going through Kalm and then going to Junon and across the sea to Costa del Sol and Nibelheim and the Gold Saucer. It was fucking a blast to jump into the Gold Saucer and do all of the things you can do in the Gold Saucer, to Cosmo Canyon, and then onto the Temple of the Ancients was so much fun, and still exploring the ways in which the story has been broken because of the events of Remake, and the way that this game sticks to the original story, but then the ways that it diverges from it is a lot of fun. And especially the little interstitials that you get where you are playing as Zack in this other, parallel universe that we kind of got a glimpse of at the end of the first game. And, what does that mean? And what does that mean to the grander story of things that we're telling? This one didn't leave me with the same, what the fuck just happened that the end of Remake did, but it still leaves me absolutely I am so curious to see what they're going to do with the final game of this, to see how it all ties together. Are they going to try and undo things of the original story, or what are they going to let live and what and not? And the fact that you play this game and you're going through kind of area by area, and this as I was replaying it, this is the best Ubisoft game of the year easily, because it does the tower thing of unlocking and opening up an area, and fun, lots of little kind of story collectibles to find around the world. I love that you go through each of those areas and everything feels so detailed and so big. And then once you get to the end of everything, you can take the tiny Bronco and you can go all the way back to that open calm area, and the whole world is connected. And yeah, they're probably doing mask loadings and stuff like that in the travel, but the fact that they made such a rich, big, detailed world means they've already got that rich, big, detailed world ready to go for the final game. They just need to add a few things in the northern continent, basically, that we haven't already been to. And I can't wait to see where we go from there, and see how everything wraps up. But yeah, Final Fantasy VII Rebirth was such a great experience to have this year, to really kick off the year almost, and was a follow-up to Remake, which did the impossible, and I continue to be blown away by how well this is all coming together.
I completely see where you're coming from on it. I see why it's your game of the year. For me, it hit all those notes as well, but for me, it just did not. I think when I was ranking it, it was bouncing between 1, 2, and 3 for quite a while. My end of the year was really determining what were going to be my top 3, or the order of my top 3.
Yeah.
And a month from now, I might have a different order for them. Final Fantasy Rebirth was definitely my number 1 game for a lot of the year. For all those same reasons you mentioned, as well as the way that it explored characters in a broader fashion, because we are taking a smaller chunk of the game, similar to what Remake did, but even grander, even with more detail, and really helped you feel like a group of people who were traveling together, moving together through the world. Characters were growing together.
Yeah. Even the little, because the game has everybody traveling together, and it isn't the, PHS system of the original where it's okay, you've got your 3 party members, having them comment on the world, even if they're not in your active party, they're still there. They're still talking to all the other characters and stuff like that. And the side quests also just being so great in like fleshing out the world that came before and stuff like that. We talked about like the idea of like the the war between Junon and Shinra. Like, it's barely glossed over in the original kind of games, but like the getting to see really the remnants of that war as you go into this bigger, broader world that is much more fleshed out and detailed. Just was a ton of fun, just getting to explore like the history of this version of the Final Fantasy VII world and lore and history behind it all.
I think the changes they made to the narrative overall, because I got to Nibelheim expecting it to be like the first, like the original game, and it's instead of being like, oh no, this is like a medical retreat, like a medical place for people who are suffering from Mako-related diseases. I'm like, that's such a fascinating.
Yeah, they're not trying to like pretend that the whole town didn't burn down anymore. Like,
they're like, we remade it exactly the way it was, but stuff happened. Everybody died.
But yeah, and part of that is because there were other survivors. Like, there are other people that got out of the town, so they couldn't like when in the original game the town has like 10 people in it. Yeah, they could just kind of like, yep, the whole town died and they rebuilt it from scratch kind of thing. But here it was like that doesn't really make sense. So you get like people that fled. Obviously, there were people that got Tifa to medical help. So that was a fun divergence too.
A great a lot of, I would say for the most part, divergences always worked. The one divergence that I'm still, and this is really why it's lower on my list, is the final divergence.
Yeah, the end of the.
I did not care for going from Temple of the Ancients to City of the Ancients right away. I did not care for. There's a lot of different like small things about that ending that just don't work for me, don't vibe with me. That didn't, because I don't need what's going to happen next. Like the mystery that they're trying to pull here, and like kind of the mystery box situation of playing also with multiple versions of reality, multiple like different universes and everything. It makes great for YouTube essays, but for my gaming experience, I felt frustrated.
Mm-hmm.
Part of that was also the fact that I fought Sephiroth like 8 different times before I finally beat him.
Yeah. Oh God, they still fuck up the like if you die mid-fight, the choices that they give you of like, do you want to restart here or here or here or here makes zero sense. And so I ended up like restarting and refighting that whole battle instead of like at a mid-boss checkpoint of that battle. And just infuriatingly frustrating. Yeah.
It took away from the joy I had of playing with Cloud and Zack at the same time in their Sephiroth fight. Like, there's parts of that fight that I loved. The kind of like end fight Sephiroth fight from the original game where you were fighting like the giant tower Sephiroth the giant tower Sephiroth. I love it calling back to that and doing a lot of fun things with the party that way. But man, oh man, is it like it was a lot of swapping and a lot of like materia like handling over and everything like that a lot made that final section feel way disjointed because I was doing micromanagement, trying to like fix things and do things. I might not be remembering that exactly correctly, but that's just how I am recalling it at this point.
I mean, it's definitely a like you need to be on the ball with like switching and activating people's abilities so that you can unlock the synergy abilities and stuff like that to really do the heavy hits. And so you do need to. You can't just like rely on I'm going to control Cloud and let everybody else do their thing because that doesn't trigger some of those other abilities. So there is definitely an element of like, okay. And like some of it comes down to if you got really good at like, using the battle shortcuts and stuff like that, I just never bother with that. I'm always going in and being like, okay, let me, I'll either while I'm Cloud, I'll use the triggers to switch to like trigger Tifa's ability or whatever, or I'll switch to Tifa and just kind of do it from there.
Yeah.
Just to have a better sense of like where's she at even on the battlefield.
Yep, that's another thing too. Yeah. I will say overall, like we're talking the slimmest of margins that separate this game from being my number one.
Yeah.
But really it comes down to that. The fact that Sid and Vincent aren't playable despite being like pseudo party members. And not even like not even to the aspect that Red 13 wasn't a playable party member. He still was out there doing damage and doing stuff. But the fact that they are relegated to being very much supporting cast took away from my excitement for this game. But gives me excitement for the next game.
Yeah, that's. I mean, like I'm thinking like they completely bypass Rocket Town.
Yeah, Rocket Town's not a thing,
and so that's a thing we're theoretically still going to get in the next game, and I think that'll be a fun thing to like. We're going to get more of the Sid stuff. We'll get more of the Vincent stuff.
I'm really hoping we get the full playable Vincent backstory to get that engaged with, because another thing they did very well in this game is they brought I'm trying to remember what they called it back in the day. Compilation of Final Fantasy VII characters into this game, especially from Crisis Core.
Yeah.
A lot of Crisis Core love in this game. As somebody who played Crisis Core, the remaster.
Shout out Cisne.
Yep, shout out Cisne. Playing the remaster earlier this year before the game came out. You lent me your copy and I played it. Had a phenomenal time getting to revisit stuff like that and getting to see kind of the intergrade aspects of the compilation stuff of like Deep Ground also carrying forward a little bit here. Getting a lot, like you said, it really fleshes out Shinra as a company organization. Like, how is the power company this strong? Granted, we live in Arizona and we have to deal with SRP, so we're fully aware of how a like utility municipality can somehow determine the entire political spectrum of a state.
I think you have this bias against SRP, and it's like APS is way more of the state than SRP is. So
well, SRP is a water municipality, so it can't be run by the state. Like the state can't make laws regarding it.
I mean,
regulations.
APS and SRP are both factors of all this.
Sure. Anyway, my personal bias against local utility companies aside, it delivers on just about everything you wanted, but I just think it doesn't leave the taste left in my mouth at the end of Remake was one of wonder and amazement. And the one I felt at the end of Rebirth was a combination of, I'm really excited to see where it goes next, but the last hour and a half has been very frustrating at times. It did not feel like jumping from Temple to City of the Ancients felt frustrating because there's no, oh, you've been catatonic for days that we've been doing this. And it's like the opportunity to explore the City of the Ancients was like not there. Temple of the Ancients, honestly, Temple of the Ancients was too long, in my opinion. And this is somebody who didn't enjoy Temple of the Ancients in the original PS1 Final Fantasy VII.
Sure.
Comes again around here. Way too long.
Yeah, like because they bypass things like Rocket Town and Mediel. I'm very curious, and we also got some of like the Mako like memory stuff that happens in Mediel. We got that earlier in Rebirth. I'm curious like where some of that's, because obviously still at the end of Rebirth, Cloud still is not putting all the pieces together. Like he's still in a Mako infused state, so we haven't completely broken through that yet. And what's that going to mean for the next game?
Also, the materia juggling of holy materia and meteor materia, kind of like bouncing around universes.
Yep.
Fine. Like there's just a lot of it that I'm just like, that I see as like frustration points that do hold us back from being my game of the year. Now, if they had given me playable Vincent, would that have been like maybe the number one? You better believe it would.
We're gonna get the ultimate weapons in the next one. And
I'm very excited for that. Yeah.
How freaking crazy that's gonna be, and that'll be, I'm sure, another thing that's gonna piss me off in a platinum trophy, hunt or something like that. But a ton of fun. Absolutely loved my time with Rebirth, and it ended up being my game of the year. So despite our best efforts, we still end up on nearly a 4-hour podcast here. Unsurprisingly.
Yep.
So our overall top 10 for the site, let me go ahead and just grab a timestamp for this bit, is so a couple honorable mentions that were basically either in our top 10, in either of our top 10s, but didn't make the overall site top 10. Helldivers 2, Legend of Zelda Echoes of Wisdom, Gundam Breaker 4, and The Plucky Squire all make the honorable mention list. Then at number 10, Prince of Persia, The Lost Crown comes in at number 10. Tied at number 9, Zenless Zone Zero and Unicorn Overlord. Then at number 7, we have a tie of Frostpunk 2 and Dragon Age the Veilguard. Number 5, another tie, a whole bunch of ties here. Tie between Marvel Rivals and Balatro. Number 4, Like a Dragon Infinite Wealth with the 9 points from my number 2 ranking. And then our top 3 at 16 points, Metaphori Fantasio, number 3. 17 points, Astrobot at number 2. And with 18 points, Final Fantasy VII Rebirth is our number 1 That Nerdy Site Game of the Year 2024. So shout out to all the games that we had in 2024. It was definitely a weird year where it was like highs and then lots of lulls and lows. I talk about in my my write-up, like I spent so much time this year going back and playing old things, which I don't always do. Playing Dragon Age Inquisition, playing Yakuza 3 and 4 certainly, but then like going back and playing Fallout 4 again. I spent 100 hours in Metal Gear Solid 5 just because I was like looking for that kind of gameplay experience. All the time I spent in Stardew again. There were a lot of lulls in terms of like new things that were grabbing my attention this year. So it was also the hardest year I've ever had to try and like come up with a top 20 list. And really a lot of the games in my top 20 list were letdowns. Like it's not until you get into like the 12 and 11 that I shouted out in the honorable mentions of like Indiana Jones, where I'm like, these are games I would recommend at least to people. A lot of my top 20 is like, I played through it, and if it was for you, great. Did not hit for me. But yeah, like in years past, it's been very easy for me to get to 20 games that I'm like, I liked all of these games. A lot of games in my top 20 that are less than games I liked.
Which is crazy because like our top 5 games, all 10 like super high rating, 10 out of 10 games, right? Like,
that's again, it was like extremes. It was a year of extremes, really. It was like some of my favorite games of the last decade came out this year, and then a whole bunch of games that just did not click for me.
It's a weird mixture of like peaks and valleys, but like the peaks are an embarrassment of riches. Like we got so many 10 out of 10 games this year, and it's just so unevenly distributed as well across the year. It really was just like a really weird year for the games industry as well. So
all right, well, that is going to do it for our Game of the Year episode. We should be back next week with our Movie of the Year episode, and I believe Logan's planning on joining us for that, but we gotta make sure we actually get that coordinated with him and figure out the timing of all that. And that's even going to be another interesting one, because like I think I watched 15 movies last year that I'm counting, and
I still have to build my list. I don't know if I watched 10 movies this year.
I'm sure you did. But yeah. Anyway, we can make our way around our table. You follow Cameron at revcabot.bsky.social. Anything you would give a shout out to there, Cam?
I want to give a massive shout out to Kinda Funny for wrapping up 10 years of being Kinda Funny. They, of course, the biggest inspiration for us to be doing what we're doing now. Yeah,
it's like, this has always been the tricky thing. They are entering their 10th year.
This
wasn't their 10th year. This wasn't their 10-year anniversary.
They're entering their 10th year.
It's just we're now celebrating 10 years of Kinda Funny.
We've gotten 10 years of these guys and gals, guys and gal. Oh, gals. I'll say plural because their spouses and partners are just as much a part of it as them.
Yeah, and guest hosts over the years and stuff.
Absolutely, you're right. Just what an incredible company of people who have inspired, tens of thousands of us to, if you want to know why the gaming sphere is filled with so many goddamn podcasts, it's because people have inspired. Some of the people who inspired us to, the reason you and I know each other, the reason why we are here doing this right now is because we happen to have one friend in common on Facebook. So I said, I'll room with you at Kinda Funny Live 1.
Yep.
Without Kinda Funny, there is none of this. And so it goes without saying that a enormous congratulations for entering your 10th year, and an incredible and grateful thank you for all the work that you do.
Yeah, I agree. That was also going to be my shout out. After you can follow me at trevorjstarkey.bsky.social. But yeah, I sat down and pretty much had the Kinda Funny 10-year stream basically running in the background all day until the wee hours of the morning because they went super long in their end game of things. And I remember, January 2020 or 2015, having, a month prior seen Greg and Colin at the first PlayStation experience. And like, that was the first time I met them, after having listened to Beyond and seen IGN stuff for years and years, and them like going onto Twitter and them basically being like, we're leaving IGN. I spent that day at work completely not doing work and just locked into their, very first Kind of Funny Day stream kind of thing, just to try and understand what the heck was going on and what they like. And yeah, I've been following them ever since. Definitely have valleys in terms of like, I don't, the pandemic definitely fucked things up in terms of like, I don't get to engage with the community as much anymore because we don't have community events anymore. And the community has become so splintered from the days when it was like, okay, yeah, we were all like in the Facebook group. And that was like a good central place. But yeah, as people just kind of moved away from Facebook, I'm just not there anymore. And just harder to kind of keep up with what everybody's up to. But always a delight to see them and see how they've thrived and see how many, all of their, community hires are people I knew from the community before they got hired, and were friends in the community before they got hired. And so it's always wonderful getting to see and celebrate all of the work they've done over the years. So yeah, shout out to our friends over at Kind of Funny, and may they have another 10 great years ahead in the years to come. The big thing I was hoping that they were going to announce would have been a like return to a Kind of Funny live event. Wasn't there. But I'm still hopeful that they'll find something to bring us all back out there to San Francisco someday. Because I miss seeing all those people that I haven't gotten to see in so many years. And yeah, just how the community has changed over the years too. But yeah. Yes, they touch on in the in there how many of us they've inspired, and how many of this they brought together as a community. So shout out to them. Also give a plug to That D Plus show. Last week we did our episode on What If, season 3, so you can check that out. This week will probably be Jim Henson Idea Man, I believe is going to be our plan for this week's That D Plus show. So if you missed that documentary, go and catch that and watch that. And yeah, you follow all of us over at That Nerdy Site, and stay tuned to That Nerdy Site, where maybe not in tandem with this episode dropping, but you will get like our write-ups of our top 20s. I've been working on my favorite platinum trophies of this year. I'll probably have another one for my favorite Lego sets of 2024, as I often do.
I'm almost done with my Game of the Year one.
I've still got a few more entries to put in my Game of the Year one.
You've just been working on all of them all at the same time, which makes sense.
Been switching back and forth.
I'm very much like one list at a time person. So
yeah, and that's I have like throughout the year I have an ongoing tally of like, here are the games that I'm putting in consideration, and I rank them as I go throughout the year. Same with the platinum trophies. Here are all the platinums I got this year, and which ones were my favorites and all that stuff.
You're so damn well organized. I love it.
Yeah, and same with my movie list. So got that all ready to go for next week when we do movie of the year. So stay tuned for all that. And yeah, you'll get all those extra write-ups over on the website, thatnerdysite.com. If you liked what you heard, once again, please rate, review, like, subscribe. Thank you for sticking it out for another 4 hours, despite it just being the two of us this year. Thank you for listening. As always, stay nerdy and be good to each other.